Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the wild, dusty brilliance of the Roman Empire. Not just the togas and gladiators and over-the-top emperors, but the tech. Yeah, real advanced, mind-blowing, centuries ahead of their time kind of stuff. From indoor plumbing to rotating stage mechanisms, the Romans weren't just conquerors, they were engineering nerds. And the more you look, the weirder and more impressive it gets. But fair warning, you probably won't survive this. I mean, unless you've got a strong immune system, an appetite for boiled dormice, and the ability to outrun a stampede of legionnaires marching in formation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure, no imperial decree. Also, what city are you watching from? And what time is it there? I'm always curious how far this reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals squelch slightly on the packed dirt path, the air warm with the distant scent of olive oil, sun-warmed limestone, and something else, cleaner than expected. Ahead, whizzing out of the hills like a giant stone centipede, arches stretch across the landscape, monolithic and perfectly spaced, shadowing the earth beneath like ribs of a great ancient beast. You're looking at a Roman aqueduct, and honestly it shouldn't exist. Not in this time, not with the tools they had. But it does. You're standing just outside Rome itself, around the 1st century CE, and the Aqua Claudia looms over you. A water highway in stone. It's massive, 40 miles long. And it's not powered by pumps or electricity or anything modern, just gravity. Soft, simple, constant gravity. And that's what makes this thing so bananas. You climb one of the stone support towers. Don't worry, no guards are watching tonight. And when you reach the top, you crouch beside the water channel, peering at the slow, quiet stream trickling through a brick-lined trough. It's silent up here. Not much splash. Just the whisper of clean water flowing downhill, perfectly calibrated over dozens of miles to maintain a steady, gentle slope. Roughly 1 inch every 100 feet. Think about that. Some Roman surveyor with no drone, no satellite, just a wooden tool called a couriers, managed to guide this stream over hills, through tunnels and across entire valleys without messing it up. One bad angle and the whole thing floods or dries up. But they nailed it. You lean over and touch the water, cool and clear, sourced from mountain springs miles away. It'll eventually reach public fountains, private villas, and the infamous Roman baths. And get this, Rome had 11 of these aqueducts by the height of the empire, delivering over 200 million gallons of water a day. Per day. Modern cities still struggle with that volume. And while we're on the topic, did you know some Romans had better access to water pressure than you do in your 3rd floor apartment? Seriously, wealthy homes had pipe-fed fountains. Some had lead piping. Yes, lead. And yes, we now know that's not ideal. There's even a fringe theory, slightly more tinfoil than toga, that argues lead poisoning contributed to Rome's decline. Some scholars say the levels weren't that dangerous. Others point to the symptoms of madness among certain emperors and raise an eyebrow. Nero, anyone? Anyway, you shift your weight and look down at the aqueduct's arches. They aren't just pretty, they're crucial. The Romans didn't build bridges like this just to show off. The repeating arch distributes weight perfectly, like a team of gym bros sharing the load. Arches let them stretch aqueducts across valleys and uneven terrain, without compromising flow or risking collapse. It's so efficient that modern highway engineers still use the same principle. You descend the structure and follow the aqueduct's shadow into the city. Along the way, you pass inspection hatches where workers can monitor and clean the channels. And here's a weird fact. Those workers had an entire job category called aquarii, full-time water technicians. The Roman Empire had water departments before your hometown even had roads. That's humbling. As you walk, you start to notice little things. How the streets angle ever so slightly downward toward the stone gutters, how buildings are grouped with water access in mind. The entire urban design bends to this invisible flow of water. Cleanliness and abundance were part of the power image. Rome didn't just have water, it flaunted it. In a time when most cities stank of sewage, Rome offered free-flowing fountains on the street corners. Water was propaganda. But here's a bit of tension under the surface. Scholars still debate whether Rome's water obsession was sustainable long-term. Some argue the aqueducts were wasteful, that a lot of water just poured out into ornamental basins or evaporated in open-air channels. Others say the system's redundancy was genius, allowing backup sources and seasonal adjustments. It's the eternal argument, luxury or logistics. You reach the edge of the Subura district now, where the rich and the poor live practically on top of each other. A public fountain trickles here into a marble basin shaped like a lion's head. A kid barefoot and grinning runs past holding a chunk of bread in one hand and splashing water with the other. No one stops him. Clean water is for everyone, at least in theory. You take a moment to sit, the stone warm beneath you, and stare back at the aqueduct now glowing orange in the setting sun. It stretches across the hills like a reminder. Rome isn't just brutal conquests and power-hungry emperors. It's math. It's engineering. It's someone, 2,000 years ago, using a stick and some string to build a masterpiece that still humbles concrete jungles today. And this was just the plumbing. You shift in your seat, the faint echo of trickling water still in your ears, and the light breeze carries a faint scent of limestone and pine resin. As dusk slips into night over the 7 hills of Rome, you begin to notice another smell, damp stone and something slightly earthy, like the inside of a cave that's been polished clean by centuries of use. That scent is coming from beneath your feet, from the bones of the empire. You're about to find out how the Romans, masters of water, also became masters of something far stranger, immortal concrete. You follow the edge of a construction site just off the Forum, where a new temple is being built, probably for some fresh-faced emperor who wants his name etched into stone before he earns it. The site buzzes with quiet work even this late. Torches line the scaffolding. A few labourers chant rhythmically as they mix greyish slop in a stone basin. It doesn't look like much, but what you're watching is the making of Roman concrete, opus caementitium, and it's basically time travel in wet form. Now, concrete might not sound sexy, but consider this. Modern concrete crumbles after 50 to 100 years. Rome's version? It's been chilling under oceans, sun, hon, and shifting tectonic plates for 2,000 years, and it's still holding its shape. Some structures, like the Pantheon dome, which you'll eventually step under, are still the largest unreinforced concrete domes in the world. No steel rods, no patch jobs, just ancient chemistry we barely understand even now. You kneel beside one of the vats, and a friendly builder, arms caked in dust, tunic sweat-stained, nods and hands you a small trowel. "Here," he mutters, "see for yourself." You scoop the material and it's oddly thick, gritty, and oddly warm. Not like quick-set cement from the hardware store, but more like bread dough with rock salt. You sniff it. A mix of ash, lime and seawater. Yes, seawater. That's one of the key ingredients. You see, Roman concrete isn't just a recipe, it's a geological collaboration. Instead of using fresh water, which makes most concrete brittle over time, the Romans used volcanic ash, particularly from the Bay of Naples, and the salt water to trigger a chemical reaction with lime. Over decades, this combo doesn't weaken, it grows stronger. Scientists in your time now know it forms crystals inside the mix, specifically aluminum tobermarite, which literally heals cracks as they appear, like some ancient version of self-healing armour. The builders here don't know the chemistry, of course, they just know what works. They've watched how harbour walls near Ostia grow tougher the longer they sit underwater, almost like they're becoming part of the earth itself. You glance across the construction yard and spot massive chunks of concrete being cast in wooden moulds, foundations, support pillars, even curved ceiling dissections. They're being shaped like puzzle pieces for a structure not yet assembled. It's modular architecture before that was even a thing. Here's where it gets a little quirky. Some scholars believe the Romans didn't just stumble onto this recipe, they might have stolen it. Or inherited it. The Greeks had their own versions of concrete-like materials, and volcanic ash was no secret. But what the Romans did was scale it, relentlessly. Like with everything else, once they had a working formula, they built it everywhere. Temples, aqueducts, amphitheatres, bathhouses, ports, villas, even sewer systems. There's Roman concrete in modern-day Syria and Morocco. One empire, one mix. And if you're wondering, yes, there's a bit of a nerd fight over whether Roman concrete is objectively better than today's stuff. Some say yes, especially for longevity and underwater use. Others point out it couldn't handle today's skyscraper demands. But you're not building a glass tower here. You're standing next to a worksite that, without rebar or cranes, will erect something that laughs in the face of time. You wander farther, past a massive pile of tufa stones, volcanic blocks lightweight enough to lift but strong enough to use as filler, and approach the edge of a semi-finished structure. A temple in progress, columns unfluted, foundation still raw. A young engineer scribbles calculations in charcoal on a wooden slate. He notices you staring and, with the enthusiasm of someone who's spent way too much time thinking about ash, explains how they layer the concrete. First a rubble core, then pour the concrete in courses, then press in ceramic shards to create texture and binding. It's like watching someone bake a cosmic lasagna. You reach out and touch the curing wall. It's warm to the touch. That's not just your imagination. The exothermic reaction between lime and water means this stuff heats up as it sets, and as it cools, it begins its slow path to geologic stability. No additives, no plasticizers, just ash and time. And it wasn't just for big buildings. You step into a domus, a Roman home under construction nearby, and notice concrete being used for floors, walls, even simple benches and water basins. The mix changes slightly depending on purpose. More pumice for lighter walls, more dense stone for load-bearing columns. It's a fluid technology, literally and figuratively. But here's the fun bit of historical debate. Some researchers think the Romans may have lost the full bath recipe by the end of the empire. As quality control dipped, so did the effectiveness of the mix. The secret sauce, particularly the ideal volcanic ash from specific locations, was no longer available or prioritized. When Rome fractured, so did its industrial knowledge. You can almost feel the tragedy in that, something brilliant fading into folklore. And yet here it is, still standing. The proof is all around you. In bridges you've walked across, in harbours that still defy salt and tide, in domes that echo with 2 millennia of whispered history. The fact that modern engineers study Roman ruins like sacred texts should tell you something. The Romans didn't just build for now, they built for always. You exhale, long and so, feeling the warmth of the concrete at your fingertips, and the slight pulse of time moving backward, then forward again. Behind you, the builders keep working, their chants low and rhythmic, their torches flickering like stars against the half-finished stone. You step away quietly, leaving the future to cure in peace. Your sandals hit the stone again with a dull tap, and you follow a low road snaking out of the city. Not one of those rickety, muddy trails you're used to on fantasy maps or backcountry timelines. No, this one's wide, broad enough for 2 wagons to pass without trading paint. And it's so flat you could roll a marble on it and watch it vanish to the horizon. This is a Roman road, and you're about to realise it's not just a way to get from point A to point B. It's an instrument of conquest, a flexus of logistical power, and weirdly, an art form. You kneel at the edge of the road and press your fingers against the layers. There's the top stone, polished smooth by centuries of feet, hooves and wooden wheels. Beneath that, crushed gravel, beneath that a thick layer of sand and clay. And below even that, giant foundation stones fitted so tightly together, it's like they were cut with lasers. But they weren't. They were shaped with hand tools, muscle and patience. The Romans called it the Via Munita, the fortified road. A built-in metaphor for how they ran things, strong, unyielding, and always going somewhere important. You walk, and honestly it's comfortable. You'd expect some medieval nightmare of mud and wheel ruts, but this road is firm, slightly convex to allow water to run off the sides and dotted with mile markers. Literal stones, every 1,000 paces, carved with the name of the emperor who ordered the construction and the distance to the nearest big city. You spot one and squint, Via Appia, the queen of Roman roads, stretching south from Rome all the way to Brundisium on the Adriatic. This thing is over 300 miles long and still visible in parts today. You're basically walking on a time machine that forgot to break down. As you pass a small rest stop, a group of legionnaires clatter by, boots kicking dust, shields bouncing on their backs. You step aside as they march in formation, not a hair out of place. They nod at you, efficient, purposeful, unbothered. They know the road beneath their feet is why they're still alive. Because Roman roads weren't built for tourists or for farmers, they were built for speed. Specifically for moving legions. 10,000 men, 50,000 sandals, 1,000 supply carts, all able to deploy across the empire at ridiculous speed for the time. Roads like this turned Rome into a hydra. You cut off a head, and 2 more show up before you've even wiped your sword. And it wasn't just the military that benefited. Trade followed, ideas followed, even gossip followed. A letter written in Londinium, modern-day London, could reach Rome in a few weeks. That's faster than some modern bureaucracies work, and they didn't even have zip codes. You pass another traveller, this one leading a cart stacked with amphorae, ceramic jugs sealed with wax, probably olive oil or wine bound for some coastal city. He offers a nod and a word you don't quite catch, and you keep moving. The world's first international highway system surrounds you, complete with logistics hubs, rest stops, and signs. And yes, signs. Stone ones, carved ones. Some roads even had cursus publicus stations, state-run inns for official travellers, where fresh horses and warm meals waited. Think of it like an ancient Roman Uber Eats meets Motel 6, but with more spears. You pause to sit on a low wall near a fork in the road. The wind shifts and brings with it a scent of crushed thyme, fresh dung, and roasting meat. Somewhere nearby, someone's got a portable grill going. Maybe kebabs, maybe something weirder. A couple of local kids zip by, barefoot, laughing, chasing each other around a milestone as if it were a jungle gym. And there's something quietly comforting about it all. This road has been here longer than most countries you've heard of. It was here when emperors ruled, and it's still here now. Stone doesn't argue. Stone just stays. There's a long-standing debate among scholars about just how advanced Roman road building really was. Some argue it was brute force and manpower. They had millions of slaves and endless time, so sure, they could pave the world. Others point to the precision of the layouts. How many roads are laser straight across hundreds of miles? Some archaeologists argue Roman roads were actually too rigid, not flexible enough to handle long-term erosion the way later medieval roads were. But here's the thing. These roads weren't meant to last forever. They were meant to last long enough. And somehow, they did both. You lie back on the side of the road, head against a sun-warmed milestone and look up at the sky. You realise how many feet must have passed over this exact spot. Centurions, merchants, slaves, emperors in golden litters, outlaws maybe, poets, and now you, one more human in a long, unbroken line of travellers, all following the same stone veins that pulse through the Empire's body. And here's the weird fringe fact for tonight. There are rumours, half joke, half mystery, that some of the Roman roads align strangely well with modern ley lines or energy maps. Total pseudoscience maybe. Or maybe the Romans were just really good at picking paths of least resistance, both physically and cosmically. You never know. You feel a tiny vibration beneath you. Could be a cart, could be a horse, or maybe it's just the old road remembering footsteps. You rise and dust yourself off. In the distance, the road splits again. One branch toward the coast, one toward the hills. And isn't that kind of the whole point? Rome's roads didn't just move people. They moved power. They moved culture. They connected a world that had never been connected before. And the craziest part? All roads really did lead to Rome. You've walked on one, you'll walk on more, and each one will whisper something different. But they'll all carry you forward, always forward. You're back in the city now where the air smells like sweat, olive oil, roasted chickpeas, and somewhere nearby something burning that probably shouldn't be. The streets pulse with noise, barkers shouting prices, sandals slapping on stone, and the occasional clatter of a dropped amphora, followed by a loud groan and a few creative Latin curses. But above the din, echoing from a hilltop fortress, you hear a sound that cuts through everything else. Thoom! You stop. You stop. It happens again. Not thunder, not drums. Something heavier. You follow the sound up a narrow street, past graffitied walls and sun-faded market stalls, and find yourself looking up at a training field. And on that field, Romans testing their war toys. Buckle up. You've found the siege engineers. Roman warfare was brutal. No surprise there. But what often gets missed in the Hollywood slow-mo blood sprays is just how mechanical their approach to destruction was. You climb a hill beside the field and get a good look at the source of that noise, a massive onager, an ancient torsion-powered catapult, being cranked back by 4 sweating men and 2 oxen. The machine creaks and moans like a wooden demon. Then release. The arm snaps forward, flinging a huge stone that arcs into the air and slams into a target wall downfield, smashing it into dust and splinters. A cheer rises. You flinch, understandably. This isn't just chaos for the sake of it. The Romans were obsessive about calculated force. They didn't just build siege engines, they refined them. They had field manuals, treatises from Greek predecessors like Archimedes, and engineers attached to legions whose job was to set up kill machines before the first arrow even flew. You walk past the onager and get a better look at its angry little cousin, the ballista. Imagine a giant crossbow mounted on wheels. Twin torsion springs made of twisted sinew power its arms, and it fires heavy bolts that could punch through walls or human torsos with surgical precision. They weren't just throwing rocks and hoping for the best, they were aiming. The ballista was Rome's sniper rifle, and it could be set up in under a day. You duck as one fires, the bolt zips past with a bone-rattling whump, embedding in a hay dummy with a horrible little shudder. These machines weren't just for intimidation, they were for shaping battles. You overhear two engineers arguing over the angle of elevation needed to breach a hypothetical tower. One's holding a wax tablet covered in equations. The other gestures wildly with a plumb line and a brass tool that looks suspiciously like a protractor. This is military math, ancient style. Here's a weird little fact most people don't realise. The Romans loved torsion weapons so much they built some into their warships. Yeah, floating death platforms. During naval battles, they'd mount smaller ballistae on decks, and even flame-throwing devices that use siphoned oil and pressurised air. Some ships were less watercraft and more floating fortresses. One battle report from the Eastern campaigns even describes a siege tower mounted on a ship. Imagine rowing that into harbour. You move toward a more experimental section of the training ground, where someone's testing a repeating ballista, yes, repeating. Like rapid fire, it's a crank-powered design attributed to Hero of Alexandria, or possibly an ambitious Roman tinkerer. You watch as it launches bolt after bolt in quick succession. Not quite Gatling gun fast, but way too efficient for something running on ropes and gears. But here's where it gets debatable. Historians are still scratching their heads about just how widespread some of these machines were. For example, archaeological evidence of full-size onagers is scarce, and much of what we know comes from scattered descriptions or vague diagrams in ancient texts. Were they everywhere, or rare, elite tools only used in massive sieges? Scholars argue both sides. Some believe the onager was used more symbolically in later eras, especially when Rome was trying to intimidate enemies. Others say they were the real deal, but so big and expensive that they didn't survive the fall of Rome intact. What is clear, though, is that Roman siege warfare was like bringing a giant calculator to a knife fight. You take a walk down a dusty row of old trebuchets and cranes, some designed to raise siege towers, others to yank down enemy walls. The logistics are mind-numbing. Want to know how long it took to set up a siege camp with palisades, trenches, latrines, cook fires and engine towers? About 2 days. 2. They even carried prefabricated components, like flat-pack siege warfare. You crouch beside one disassembled battering ram, the kind you'd expect from movies, and find it wrapped in fireproofed leather, its head shaped like a boar. The front is scorched from a recent test, and you realise this thing didn't just bash, it burned through. You imagine standing behind a shield wall as one of these slammed into your city gate, over and over like the heartbeat of doom. And don't get started on the scorponens, smaller portable versions of the ballista. These could be operated by 2 men and were used both defensively and on the move. You can still picture them mounted on the walls of Masada, or used in ambushes against Germanic tribes, firing bolts the size of broom handles through thick fog and forest. Quick to assemble, terrifying to face, and shockingly precise. As the sun dips lower, the engineers start packing up. You sit quietly by the shattered remains of a practice wall, watching as tools are stowed in leather bags and ropes coiled with almost reverent care. These weren't just weapons, they were the Empire's punctuation marks. Rome didn't ask politely, it arrived with siege engines, and if you didn't open the gates, it wrote history on your walls in crushed stone and splintered wood. You glance back one last time at the massive onager. It's draped in a tarp now, like some slumbering creature waiting to wake for the next war. And maybe that's the strangest thing about it. How coldly effective these machines were. Not because they were magical, but because they were logical. And when you add logic to power, you don't just fight wars, you win them before they start. You wake the next morning to the muffled gurgle of water. Again, Rome doesn't sleep quietly, it hums, beneath the gossip and sandals and caged songbirds, beneath the laughter spilling from taverns and the endless call of market traders. There's always that steady wet undercurrent, flowing, dripping, splashing, circulating. It's not just the aqueducts, it's the plumbing. And tonight, you're going to find out just how shockingly advanced the Roman world was when it came to managing the messier parts of city life. You duck into a narrow alley between apartment blocks, insulae they're called, and instantly feel the temperature shift. It's cooler here, shadier. The smell, okay, a bit rough. Something halfway between mildew, overripe figs, and Well, exactly what you'd expect from a place with public toilets and open drains. But stay with it. Because what looks like chaos is actually a citywide hydraulic masterpiece. You start with from the basics. Water in, waste out sounds simple. But imagine doing that for over 1 million people without power tools, without industrial pipes, and without, bothering to invent rubber gaskets yet. The Romans managed it anyway. You kneel beside a street gutter, carved from solid stone, and run your hand along the smooth, blackened interior. It's been polished by centuries of runoff. Bathwater, rainwater, kitchen waste, sometimes worse. It all flows downhill, channeled through carefully sloped streets that feed into larger drains and, eventually, the city's main sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. And yeah, don't let the name fool you. The Great Sewer sounds like a monster from a Greek myth, and honestly, it kind of is. You sneak down a side passage near the Tiber River and find yourself peering into a dark, vaulted tunnel, the air wet and heavy with the scent of ancient decay and cool stone. You duck through a gap in the wall and boom, there it is. A yawning underground artery, big enough to drive a cart through, echoing with the sound of churning water and occasional squelches from things best left unidentified. It's been running since the 6th century BCE. That's older than the Republic. Older than Julius Caesar's great-great-great-granddad. And it's still working. Some historians argue it's the oldest functioning public infrastructure project in the world. Others get tangled in debates over how public it really was. Did the poor have access? Were private homes all connected? The truth is, it was a mixed system. Wealthy houses had direct pipe access. The poor relied on public latrines and neighbourhood drainage. But the fact that any of it functioned at all, citywide, is astounding. Speaking of which, you spot a sign etched into a marble plaque beside the road. Latrina Publica, jackpot. You duck inside a stone archway and find a long, bench-like structure lined with circular openings. It's shockingly communal. No stalls, no doors, just a marble seat, a hole, and a stream of water running below to carry away your contributions. There's even a trough in front of the seat, flowing with clean water for rinsing the communal sponge on a stick. Yes, you heard that right. One sponge, shared, sanitized, sort of. Don't think about it too hard. You sit, fully clothed, don't worry, on one of the marble benches, and marvel at how something so functional also manages to feel designed. The water keeps moving beneath you, pulled along by slope and gravity, flushing the system clean with minimal fuss. You glance around and notice little carved drains feeding into the main channel. Some connect to bathhouses, others from kitchens, even fountains. It's all one big interconnected web. Rome wasn't just a city of stone, it was a city of flow. And then there's the heating. Oh yes, you're going there. You make your way to a nearby domus, a wealthy home, where a servant agrees, grudgingly, to let you peek around. Inside, you find a private bath complex tucked at the back, still warm with morning steam. You feel the floor beneath your feet, and it's hot. Not burning, but gently, evenly heated. Welcome to the hypercore system. Beneath the floor are rows of hollow bricks propped up like tiny pillars. Hot air from a fire chamber flows through this crawl space, warming the tiles above. The heat rises into the walls through flues, turning the entire room into a low-key sauna. And it's not just used for bathhouses. Rich homes, and even some public buildings, had heated floors in the 1st century. While the rest of Europe was still huddling under furs in drafty huts, Rome had central heating. You lie down, again clothed, on the warm tile and stare up at the stuccoed ceiling. You hear the bubbling of the boiler fire beneath, the soft rattle of water in clay pipes. The Romans didn't just bathe to get clean. They made hygiene a ritual, a public ritual in fact. The bathhouses were the original wellness centres. Libraries, gymnasiums, snack bars, steam rooms, all under one roof, and clean water flowed through all of it. Here's something strange. Archaeologists found valves and pressure regulators in some Roman baths that suggest these folks understood more about water pressure than we often give them credit for. The lead pipes they used, fistulae, were stamped with the name of the manufacturer. Almost like copper piping today. And yes, let's talk about that lead. There's a long-standing theory that Rome poisoned itself slowly with all that lead plumbing. Lead pipes, lead vessels, even lead-based cosmetics. Some emperors, like Caligula and Nero, acted, let's say, erratic. but recent studies suggest the water had so much calcium carbonate that it coated the inside of the pipes, acting as a buffer. Maybe they weren't getting that much lead in their wine, or maybe they were. Scholars still argue about it. Still, you can't help but wonder if they knew something we forgot. The sheer scale of it all. The water channels, the sewer systems, the indoor fountains and heated floors feels almost modern, and yet no batteries, no motors, no apps, just gravity, geometry and guts. As you step back out into the sunlight, you pass a slave pouring wine over marble steps to wash away the day's grime. The water rolls down into a gutter, which feeds into a larger one, which flows toward the Cloaca Maxima, which empties into the Tiber, and from there, out to sea. Everything's connected. Rome didn't just conquer the world, it plumbed it. And somehow the world's been playing catch-up ever since. You've dried off, sort of. There's still a dampness clinging to your tunic from the morning's steam room excursion, but now the sun's out, and the heat of the Roman afternoon presses down like a warm blanket that someone forgot to wash. Still, it's not uncomfortable. Rome knows how to manage heat. It's part of the reason you're now stepping into one of its most spectacular social and architectural inventions, the Roman bathhouse. Not the casual splash and dash you saw earlier in a private domus, but the real deal, a public marvel of stone, fire, water, and pure logistical audacity. The Thermae of Caracalla tower over you like a temple to humidity. From the outside it looks like a palace got into a wrestling match with a fortress, and lost. Massive arches rise above, intricately carved columns flank the entrance, and statues peer down at you as if sizing up your ability to scrub properly. You step inside and the temperature changes instantly. It's warm, earthy. You can hear voices echoing, not loud but layered, and the sound of water lapping gently against marble. Somewhere a flute plays, and it feels like entering a dream curated by a very relaxed architect with OCD. The first chamber you enter is the apoditerium, the changing room. There are niches carved into the walls for sandals and tunics, and attendants, usually slaves, flutter about like polite ghosts, offering towels, oils, and stern reminders not to leave anything behind. You nod politely, strip down, mentally, we'll keep it PG, and step into the next chamber, the tepidarium. The air here is thicker. Not hot, not cold. It's like walking into a warm breath. The floor beneath you is heated, not quite as fierce as a hypercaust at full blast, but enough to lull your joints into bliss. People recline on stone benches, slathering themselves with scented oils and chatting about everything from politics to bread prices. No one's in a rush. Why would they be? This is where Rome comes to exist, not just bathe. And then you feel it. The whisper of heat that comes from the next room, the caldarium. You steel yourself and step through the arched doorway. Boom! You're hit by a wave of steam so thick you could slice it. The room is bathed in gold light from high windows, and water trickles constantly from lion-headed spouts into enormous marble basins. The heat here is intense, not violent, but enveloping. You sit at the edge of one of the pools and dangle your legs in. The water is nearly scalding, but your muscles relax instantly. You feel like butter left out in the sun. Above you, the dome rises impossibly high, supported by stone that seems to hover more than it stands. It's not just architecture, it's theatre. The acoustics are perfect. You can hear soft murmurs from across the room, yet nothing echoes too much. Some scholars believe the Romans intentionally built their domes to dampen sound frequencies, to create privacy even in crowded places. Others think it is just a happy accident of curved stone and human voices. Either way, it works. You sink deeper into the water, watching a man across the way scrape his skin with a strigil, a curved metal tool used for removing oil, sweat and dirt. He grimaces in satisfaction as he drags it across his shoulder. No soap here, just olive oil and technique. The boy offers you one with a grin. You take it and give it a tentative try. It's oddly satisfying. Like exfoliating with a butter knife wielded by a masseuse who thinks pain is a form of love. Once you've sweated yourself down to a liquid state, it's time to move. You walk, stagger really, into the frigidarium. And yep, it lives up to the name. Cold plunge pool, the water is icy, almost electric. You yelp. A few older patrons chuckle and dunk themselves like it's no big deal. The shock pulls your brain out of the fog and slaps it awake. You're alert, breathing deep. Everything feels clean. And this isn't just luxury. It's infrastructure. The baths aren't powered by magic. Behind the scenes, there's a whole army of workers keeping it running. Firemen shovel wood into the furnaces below. Slaves carry clean water and oil. Architects have calculated airflows and draft systems to keep smoke away from bathers. It's a living machine, and it's free, or mostly free, for Roman citizens. This is what taxes pay for. That and military conquest. But mostly this. There's a bit of academic debate about just how democratic the baths really were. Some argue they were accessible to all men, regardless of class. Others say the elite had their own reserved hours or sections. Women had separate hours, or even entirely separate facilities. But overall, the bathhouse was one of the few spaces where rank blurred. Senators and cobblers, retired soldiers and fresh-faced scribes, everyone ended up naked in the steam, sweating out their ambitions together. Here's something weird and wonderful. Some Roman baths had libraries. Actual libraries. So after your soak and scrape, you could go dry off and read scrolls of Virgil or treatises on astronomy. Others had snack bars, massage parlours, gyms. You start to see it, don't you? The Roman bathhouse wasn't just a place to get clean. It was a wellness centre, a social hub, a spa, a fitness area and a club, and of the water park rolled into one. You wander into the courtyard now, towel slung over your shoulder. As the sun begins to dip behind a colonnade, statues glow gold in the light. A vendor offers you a honeyed date wrapped in fig leaves. You take it, bite down. It's delicious. Around you, a dozen conversations drift through the air. Someone talking politics, someone else whispering about a new gladiator in town, another person ranting about rising olive oil prices. You lean against a pillar and close your eyes. It's loud but comforting, the hum of civilization. And then you think about where you are. A public bath with running water, heated floors, domed ceilings, and acoustics fine-tuned by hand. A building that cost millions in denarii and took years to build, just so people could soak and gossip. And yet, here it is, open, welcoming, functional, thousands of years before modern spas or saunas were a thing. The Romans didn't just want to conquer lands, they wanted to relax like kings while doing it. As the sky turns orange and purple, and the steam begins to fade into dusk, you stretch one last time, your skin flushed and glowing, your mind oddly clear. Tomorrow you'll climb towers and peek into strange machines, but tonight you're clean, warm, human. Your legs ache just a bit as you climb the scaffolding, gripping the wooden handholds like you've been doing this all your life. The wood creaks beneath your weight, but the climb is worth it. You're standing in the shadow of a temple in progress, not on the ground, but up where the real magic happens, on the construction platforms just under the roofline. And you're about to meet the unsung heroes of the Roman skyline, the cranes, gears, pulleys, and muscle-powered machines that lifted this empire literally into the clouds. Below you, the noise is rhythmic. Stone blocks thudding into place, workers shouting in clipped Latin, iron tools ringing against marble. But right beside you is a marvel that's strangely quiet, considering what it's doing. It's a massive treadwheel crane, a hulking wooden skeleton that looks like a hamster wheel designed by someone with strong opinions about leverage. Two workers step inside and begin walking like it's the most casual thing in the world. Slowly, ropes tighten. A block of limestone the size of a small cow rises off the ground with shocking grace. You lean over the edge to watch the load ascend. It's dangling from a thick hemp rope, looped through pulleys made from bronze and hard oak, redirected by a series of beams and counterweights until it seems to float in mid-air. A foreman shouts and the wheel stops. The block hovers, held steady by friction, gears and physics. You blink, no engine, no electricity. Just a few men, some simple machines, and absolute mastery of mechanical advantage. This is where the real tech lives, not in metal boxes or flashy gimmicks, but in the raw understanding of how to cheat gravity. You duck around the treadwheel and inspect the winch system. The rope is looped through something like a capstan, basically a giant spool, and fitted with poles and ratchets so it can't backslide. Safety measures, Roman style, and it works. These guys are lifting multi-ton columns to precise heights without a hint of panic. You notice another team nearby using a system of compound pulleys to slowly lower a statue head into place. It's the top piece of a multi-ton marble figure, probably Jupiter, his beard chiseled to perfection. The workers ease it down like it's made of glass, guiding it with ropes and steady hands. You watch, barely breathing. One mistake and that face shatters like a dropped plate. But it lands smoothly, locks into its socket, and the scaffolding crew erupts in cheers. Here's a quirky fact you might not have expected. Some Roman cranes were so efficient that they remained the standard in Europe for over 1,000 years. The treadwheel design you're watching was used to build Gothic cathedrals 1,000 years after Rome fell. They didn't need reinvention. They were that good. And the best part? Many were portable. They could be disassembled, transported, and rebuilt on site. A travelling circus of civil engineering. You take a seat on a half-finished ledge and gaze across the city. It's not just this one temple. There are cranes everywhere, on apartment buildings, aqueduct extensions, bathhouse renovations. Rome is a city under permanent construction, and all of it is happening with the same tools: wood, rope, metal joints, and some truly underpaid labour. You spot a smaller crane mounted on a rolling base, operated by a pair of oxen pulling a rope around a gear. That one's used for lateral movement, hauling beams into alignment. It's less glamorous, but without it, nothing gets where it needs to be. And while we're here, let's talk about gears. Not the tiny clockwork stuff from the Renaissance, but the big boys. Wooden cogs used in watermills, lifting devices, and some pretty sophisticated presses. You climb down to the ground level where a different team is assembling a new lifting frame. Nearby, a gear assembly sits open for inspection. 2 large wooden wheels interlock with pegs instead of teeth, like a child's toy scaled up to adult engineering. A worker pours olive oil over the joint to keep it running smoothly. You ask if it ever breaks. He shrugs and says, "Only when the gods are angry." Fair enough. You're ushered over to yet another fascinating piece, a block and tackle system used to align columns. It's more compact than the crane, but equally smart. Ropes pass through multiple pulleys to divide the weight across several anchor points, allowing just 2 men to move something that would take 30 to lift barehanded. You test one of the ropes. Rough, fibrous, and sticky with pitch. Your muscles strain as you pull, but the column inches forward. You stop before your arms betray you, but the system's brilliance sticks with you. Now, scholars love to argue about whether the Romans ever used gears in complex machinery like clocks or automata. There's evidence they had gear-like mechanisms, some used in the famous Antikythera device, which likely predates the Romans but was known in their world. Some fringe theories even suggest the Romans had basic gearboxes for winding winches or calculating planetary motion. Most mainstream historians remain sceptical, especially about the more ambitious claims, but the presence of precision-cut gears in their mills and presses, that's real, that's documented, and you've just seen it with your own eyes. But the real kicker here, the weirdest, the most delicious irony, is that Rome never fully industrialized. They had the tech, they had the understanding, but not the economic pressure. Slavery was cheap, labour was endless. Why build a water-powered hammer mill when you can just throw 50 humans at the same task for a few loaves of bread? That choice, more than anything, may have been what stalled Rome just short of the steam age. Still, the ingenuity is staggering. You step back and scan the skyline once more. Everywhere you look, blocks are rising, beams are swinging, domes are forming, and behind every movement is a machine. Treadwheel, pulley, gear, or winch, each one whispering defiance to gravity and time. The scaffolding creaks again, and someone calls for a break. Workers climb down, sweat-soaked and grinning, trading jokes in Latin as they descend. You linger a moment longer, high above the street, watching as the sun glints off bronze tools and freshly cut marble. It's not flashy, it's not robotic, but it works, better than it should. Because in Rome, even the machines are built to last. You don't even see the dome at first. It sneaks up on you, rising behind the dense cityscape like a secret the gods are still trying to keep. But as you wind your way through the narrow sunlit alleys of the Campus Martius, dodging wine vendors and a goat that looks surprisingly confident, there it is, the Pantheon, one of the strangest and most stunning buildings in the entire Roman world. And tonight you're stepping inside a structure so advanced, modern architects still treat it like an ancient cheat code. From the outside it looks like a classic Roman temple. Columns, triangular pediment, and bronze doors taller than your 2-story apartment. But that's just the curtain. You step past the threshold and boom, there it is, the dome. It hits you like thunder in reverse, quiet, vast, otherworldly. It's not just big, it's perfect. You stop walking because your legs forget what to do when your brain is that stunned. Your eyes rise, drawn automatically to the oculus at the centre of the dome, a 30-foot wide hole in the ceiling open to the sky. Sunlight pours through it like divine spotlighting, bathing the floor in a slow-moving circle of light that drifts across the marble like it's meditating. No glass, no supports, just open air, 42 feet above you. The dome itself? Also 142 feet wide. A perfect hemisphere balanced like a soap bubble frozen in time. And it's all made of Roman concrete. Yep, that stuff again. But this time, they've taken it to its absolute limit. You step farther in and your feet click softly on polished stone, imported marble from Egypt, porphyry from Turkey, green stone from Greece. The building's round, encircled by alcoves, statues, and oddly subtle geometry. And above you, a 4,500-ton concrete dome with no reinforcement. No steel bars, no internal ribs, just pure calculated genius. The Romans built this nearly 2,000 years ago, and no one's built a larger unreinforced concrete dome since. The secret? Gradual, sneaky brilliance. The mix of concrete changes as you go higher. Down low, it's dense and strong, filled with basalt. Up top, it's lighter, made with volcanic pumice. It's like they knew how to trick gravity into playing along. Then there are the coffers, those square indents you see carved into the ceiling. They are not just decoration, they shave off thousands of pounds of unnecessary weight. Some think they also serve a weird acoustic purpose, dampening echoes and making your voice feel intimate, even in this cavernous space. You notice something else too, the entire building seems to breathe. Not literally, of course, but the proportions, the way the space unfolds. It doesn't feel static. It feels alive. A living volume of air shaped by geometry, pressure and light. Some architectural historians call it the most perfect interior ever built. Others think it was meant as a spiritual battery, a way to capture the divine in material form. The oculus above isn't just for light, it's symbolic. The eye of the gods, or maybe the eye to the gods. Sunlight moves across the dome in a slow celestial dance, like a sundial for giants. During equinoxes and solstices, the beam of light hits precise spots, aligning with doors and niches. Scholars still argue whether this was intentional cosmic design or a happy coincidence, but standing here, it's hard not to believe they meant it. The Pantheon feels like a place built to remind humans that the heavens are watching, and maybe taking notes. You sit on one of the stone benches against the wall, still staring up. Around you, tourists from every century are doing the same. Well, some in togas, some in backpacks, all equally awed. There's something timeless here. The kind of silence that happens when people realise they are in the presence of impossible things. You notice a small, robed figure sweeping water from the floor with a bundle of reeds. Rainwater. Because remember, the oculus is open. When it rains inside. But the floor, subtly sloped toward invisible drainage holes, you'd never notice unless you looked. Another tiny trick of the architects. They thought of everything. There's still an open debate about who exactly built this version of the Pantheon. The original temple was commissioned by Marcus Agrippa during Augustus's reign, but it burned down, twice. The version you're standing in was most likely completed under Hadrian around 126 CE, but in a quirky twist of modesty, or trolling, Hadrian kept Agrippa's name on the front. Some historians think it was political. Others think Hadrian just liked playing 4D chess with future scholars. And here's your fringe fact for the day. Some conspiracy-minded researchers believe the dome contains encoded geometry based on Platonic solids or sacred harmonic ratios. That it's not just architectural perfection, it's a blueprint for the universe. You can practically feel the rabbit hole yawning open. But forget the fringe. What's real is there. Modern engineers still can't agree how exactly the Pantheon was constructed. They can guess, they can model, but the scaffolding required, the curing time for the concrete, the weight distribution, is all still partially wrapped in mystery. There are no definitive blueprints, just the result. A structure that has defied earthquakes, wars, looters, time, and the human urge to knock down and rebuild everything every 50 years. You finally stand again and walk slowly across the floor, following the light as it crawls toward the niche where Mars once stood, or perhaps Minerva, or maybe just Rome itself, staring back at you through a veil of centuries. The air smells faintly of dust and stone and incense, the kind that clings to sacred places. You exit slowly, stepping back through those massive bronze doors into the sunlight, blinking like you've returned from a dream. Behind you, the Pantheon keeps breathing, watching, waiting. You're back outside, blinking against the afternoon sun, but the light feels different now, filtered through the lens of that dome still spinning behind your eyes. Everything feels measured, proportioned, like someone took a set of divine compasses and laid out the city with mathematical care. But it's not just the buildings, not just the roads or forums, it's time itself. And now you're about to discover just how deeply the Romans bent the ticking of hours to their will. You make your way toward the Campus Martius again, where shadows stretch longer with every step. Ahead, rising like a sundial blade against the skyline, is a thin, impossibly tall obelisk. At first it looks out of place, more Egyptian than Roman, and that's because it is, stolen fair and square from Heliopolis and dragged across the Mediterranean by Emperor Augustus himself. But this wasn't just looted art. It had a purpose. It told time. You're standing at the foot of what might be the world's largest sundial. The Salarium Augusti, they called it. A vast meridian line set into the pavement, with the obelisk acting as the gnomon, the part of a sundial that cast the shadow. On specific days, the shadow would align with bronze inlays on the ground to mark the equinoxes, solstices, and even Augustus's birthday. Because what's the point of conquering the known world if you can't make the sun celebrate your birth? You walk around the base, imagining the vast circle that once radiated from it. It's mostly gone now, only fragments remain. But once, it stretched across a massive plaza, an astronomical calendar baked right into the city's floor plan. Some scholars believe it also aligned with the nearby Arapacis, Augustus's altar of peace, so that on his birthday the obelisk's shadow would strike the very heart of the altar, symbolising the emperor's cosmic right to rule. Others say that's stretching it, but hey, this is Rome. Symbolism is practically a building material. The thing about Roman timekeeping is that it wasn't just science, it was showmanship. You head toward a smaller forum nearby and spot a man consulting a portable sundial. He squints at it, adjusts a little string, then checks the angle of the sun like he's cracking a safe. These weren't just gimmicks. They were real tools, sometimes carved into marble, sometimes metal, sometimes so small they could hang from a belt. Personalised timepieces in an era before wristwatches, and naturally, they came in styles and models, because even back then, people had brand preferences. You duck into a shadowy archway and find another timekeeping marvel tucked into the wall, a horologium, a kind of water clock. It's a squat stone basin with a narrow spout and carefully marked gradations on the inside. Water drips slowly from one side to the other, measuring time with eerie patience. Some versions had floating indicators or even gears that rang bells when enough time passed. You stare into the slowly rising water and realise it's quiet here. Just the sound of liquid ticking away, each drop a tiny drumbeat in the rhythm of the empire. Roman time wasn't split neatly into 24 fixed hours like yours. Their hour changed depending on the season. Daylight was divided into 12 parts no matter what time of year it was, so an hour in summer could be much longer than one in winter. That's right. An hour wasn't always 60 minutes. It stretched and shrank like elastic, and people just rolled with it. You walk out of the shade and spot a public announcement being read aloud, a herald standing atop a small stone platform, announcing when court will convene, when the baths open, when the curfew begins. The daily schedule was tied to the movement of the sun, and the sundials that measured it weren't always accurate. In fact, there's graffiti in Pompeii mocking how often they got it wrong. One scratch note says, "The man who built this dial forgot the sun doesn't listen." And here's your quirky twist. One of the biggest problems with sundials was that they were too specific. A sundial made in Athens might be totally useless in Rome, simply because the angle of the sun is different. That didn't stop Romans from importing them anyway. There's even a story about a sundial brought from Sicily that was used in Rome for decades despite being wildly inaccurate. People just shrugged and said, close enough. You pass a courtyard where a teacher is explaining planetary motion to a group of wide-eyed students, using a bronze sphere mounted with concentric rings. It's a model of the heavens, a kind of orrery, and it shows the Roman hunger, not just to measure time, but to understand its source. Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, these weren't just gods. They were clocks in the sky, but not everyone agreed on what time really was. Some philosophers, especially the Stoics, believed time was a divine fire endlessly consuming itself, always now, never not now. Others thought time was an illusion, a byproduct of human perception. the debates got deep, and while most citizens just wanted to know when to eat lunch, up in the libraries and lecture halls, Roman scholars wrestled with the idea of temporal infinity, because even in the heart of empire, they couldn't help but wonder, is time something we keep, or something that keeps us? You pause near a fountain where a merchant is using a sundial carved into a column's base to decide when to pack up for the day. The sun hits the marker just right. He nods, stretches his back, and begins folding his linens with casual precision. Around you the city is shifting again, shadows growing long, voices lowering. You're aware more than ever that you're walking through a place that doesn't just build monuments to time, it lives in them. Before you go, one last look at the obelisk. Tall, silent, still marking time for no one in particular. You imagine Augustus smiling down through the oculus of history, perfectly aligned, perfectly timed. And then you turn and the shadow shifts. You wake the next morning to the sound of a barge horn echoing off stone walls and alleyways, deep and mournful like some ancient sea monster clearing its throat. The city of Rome is already alive, again, but today, you're not sticking to the land, you're headed down to the docks, to the part of the empire that never sleeps, never stops, and never stays still. The arteries of Roman commerce, trade routes, warehouses, harbour cranes, customs officials, grain inspectors, and everything in between. The Roman economy wasn't just local, it was global, or at least as global as the known world could manage without satellites and shipping containers. You make your way toward the Porticus Aemilia, Rome's colossal warehouse complex near the Tiber. The air here smells different. It's sharp and briny, tinged with tar spices, and, let's be honest, just a touch of fish rot. You dodge a few overenthusiastic dock workers hauling baskets of North African grain and finally reach the waterfront, where Rome gets fed, clothed, oiled, and wined. The port is a blur of activity, ropes creaking, sails flapping, cargo being shouted about in 10 different dialects. It's beautiful chaos. A massive grain ship has just arrived from Alexandria. You stare at it, its hull wide and low like a floating warehouse. It took weeks to get here, riding the predictable push of Mediterranean wind patterns and sea currents. These ships weren't primitive fishing boats. Some were over 180 feet long, with multiple decks, full galleys, and enough space for hundreds of tons of cargo, plus passengers. You climb a nearby gangplank for a better view, the deck vibrating under your feet from all the unloading. Amphorae stacked like dominoes. Bales of linen, barrels of garum, that gloriously pungent fish sauce everyone swears by. It's like a floating Costco, if Costco came with pirates. You follow the cargo flow into one of the nearby Horea, or storage buildings. These warehouses are massive, long stone rectangles with thick walls to keep out heat and rats. Each chamber is labelled with painted inscriptions. Oil from Hispania, wheat, late harvest, and spices, India. You touch a sack of peppercorns and realise it came all the way from the Malabar coast. That's 4,000 miles away, no motors, no engines. Just sail, camel, foot, and willpower. It hits you that Rome wasn't just importing things it needed, it was importing everything. Luxury goods, raw materials, even wild animals for the Colosseum. The empire ran on trade, and not just trade, but networked trade. Routes carefully managed, mapped, and protected by both military and economic muscle. The Via Egnatia in the east, the Silk Road in the farthest reaches, Egyptian ports that led to Indian goods, everything fed the belly of the beast. A clerk nearby is scribbling numbers onto a wax tablet, keeping track of imports for tax purposes. The Romans taxed by weight, by type, and sometimes by mood. But it all went through the portorium, a custom system that would feel weirdly familiar today. There were toll stations, inspectors, even something like a bureaucratic appeals process if your amphorae were confiscated for, let's say, suspicious fish content. You duck into a side room where olive oil is being tested. A young woman dips a rod into a clay jug, lifts it, sniffs, then nods with approval. She drops a little wax seal onto the jug's neck. Certified. You ask her what happens if the oil's bad. She shrugs. We throw it in the Tiber, she says. Half joking, probably. What's fascinating is how little of this is improvised. You'd expect this much trade to be chaotic, but the Romans were obsessed with regulation. They had weights and measures standardized across the empire. A pound in Britannia was a pound in Carthage. An amphora held the same volume everywhere, and each one was often stamped, by region, by producer, even by who inspected it. Accountability, Roman style, and the shipping routes themselves, You step outside and look downriver. Rome sits about 15 miles from the coast, so most of the really big cargo ships offloaded at Portus, a deep-water harbour built by the emperors just for this reason. Goods then travelled up river to Rome on flat-bottomed barges, sometimes pulled by oxen along towpaths. At peak, this system moved tens of thousands of tons of grain per year, just to keep the city from going full Hunger Games. You hop onto one of these river barges now, ducking your head beneath a canvas awning as it drifts lazily down the Tiber. The pilot shouts to another boat, and you see goods being transferred mid-river. Olive oil traded for wool, fish for salt. It's not glamorous, but it works, and it worked for centuries. Here's something odd. Despite the complexity, the Romans never developed insurance for sea trade. They had legal contracts, they had partnerships, but no formal insurance the way it would evolve later. Some historians think it was because the state often absorbed or mitigated risk by bailing out traders when disasters hit, especially those shipping grain to the capital. You couldn't let Rome starve. The mob had limits. You dock again and climb a small hill near the river. From here you can see the tangled web of roads leading out of the city, each one a trade artery reaching toward the provinces. Merchants on foot, carts loaded with Gallic cheeses or Syrian glassware, horse-drawn wagons from Gaul. You realise something strange. This economy isn't centralised. It's distributed. It's got redundancies, layers, local systems feeding global ones. It's so modern it's unsettling. You step into a shadowed alcove where a merchant is rolling up a silk banner, the colours too bright for anything local. He tells you it came through the Nabateans, from Arabia, through Petra, across the deserts. You run your fingers across the fabric and feel the miles in every thread. The Roman Empire didn't just use trade, it stitched its identity from it. And just like that, it's sunset again. The port begins to quiet. Barges tie off, crates are stacked and tarped. Merchants argue over last-minute deals. And the Tiber, still flowing indifferent and constant. You sit on a crate stamped Numidian dates, watching the last rays of light catch on the bronze plating of a ship's hull. Rome, you think, isn't a city. It's a network. An organism fed by motion, ambition, and a frankly terrifying amount of logistics. And somewhere in the dark, another ship is already approaching. You're jolted awake the next morning by the sharp clip-clop of hooves and the rumbling crunch of cartwheels over stone. It's not the usual morning market chaos. This sound is different, faster, more purposeful. You poke your head out of the shaded taberna where you crashed last night, and there they are, a fresh relay team galloping through the street, red cloaks flapping, their horses foaming at the mouth, their tunics caked in travel dust. They're not messengers. They're cursus publicus couriers, the lifeblood of Roman communication. You blink a few times, step into the street and immediately get out of the way. These guys don't slow down. They're part of Rome's imperial postal service, an astonishingly efficient system that stretched across the empire like veins on a marble statue. You turn and follow them, trailing at a distance as they ride through the city, heading toward the northern gate and the main artery of the Via Flaminia. Once you're outside the wall, the scale of the system becomes clearer. You spot a milestone at the edge of the road, carved with the usual imperial brag. How many millia passuum, thousands of paces, you are from Rome, and who had the honour of building or restoring this stretch? A few yards beyond, there's a way station, Mutatio, where fresh horses are waiting, already saddled. No chit-chat, one courier dismounts, the other mounts, and within 2 minutes they're gone again, kicking up dust as they vanish down the horizon. This is the Roman postal system in action. And it wasn't just for love letters and miss you notes. This was statecraft, orders from the emperor, reports from the frontier, tax records, census updates. Everything that needed to move quickly across thousands of miles moved through the cursus publicus. At its peak, this network could deliver a letter over 50 miles in a day. That's faster than some modern mail. You get to talking with a clerk at the station. His job is to manage the diplomas, the special travel permits that authorise use of the system. Not just anyone could hop on a relay horse and gallop down the imperial highways. This was for official business, governors, military officers, tax agents. He shows you a stamped bronze tablet with the seal of a high-ranking magistrate. It's beautiful and deadly serious. Fake one of these, and you're probably going to end up in a lion's digestive tract. The station is surprisingly well equipped. There are stables, rooms for rest, even a small kitchen turning out a flatbread and lentil stew for the weary riders. You walk past the tack room and notice something unexpected. Wax tablets, fresh styluses, ink jars, even a few spare papyrus scrolls. It's a writing station, because sometimes messages need revising, or recording, or correcting. You realise this isn't just a postal system, it's a mobile command centre, and it didn't stop at land. Rome's communication system extended to sea routes as well. Couriers travelled by ship when speed demanded it, hopping across the Mediterranean on fast-moving Liburnians, dodging pirates and storms. Messages from Egypt to Rome could arrive in just a few weeks, depending on the winds. Rome didn't rule by presence alone, it ruled by awareness, the ability to respond quickly, to adapt to crises, to act as one entity stretched over continents. That's what made it feel so terrifyingly modern. You ask the clerk how they handle emergencies, messages too urgent to wait for the next scheduled rider. He nods grimly and tells you about speculatores, military scouts trained for speed and stealth, used when things really hit the fan. These guys didn't just deliver scrolls, they knew what they carried. They rode with weapons, they travelled at night, and they could deliver sensitive intel straight into a general's hand. Think of them as the special forces of the postal world. But for all its precision, the system had its limitations. You pass another courier on the road, this one moving slower, leading a cart loaded with sealed crates. Not every message was just words. Sometimes they carried physical goods, diplomatic gifts, even bound prisoners. And while elite couriers could move swiftly, bulk mail crawled. Bureaucracy still existed. Things got lost. Schedules slipped. Some historians argue the system became bloated and inefficient in its later years. Others point to surviving documents that show it still functioned with eerie consistency, even as the empire began to crack. And here's a fun fringe theory. A few ancient sources mention fire beacons, or signal towers, used to send pre-arranged messages across distances using light and smoke, a kind of proto-telegraph. Scholars debate whether this was widespread or just used in rare military contexts, but it hints at an even deeper obsession with speed and control. I mean, Rome wasn't content with knowing what was happening. It wanted to know now. You catch a ride with a slower cart headed back toward the city. The driver's an old man who's been working the route for 40 years. He talks your ear off about the glory days, how, back in the time of Augustus, the system was so tight you could set your sundial by the hoofbeats. He tells you about a time when a courier rode from Lyon to Rome in under 4 days during a crisis. You ask if it's true. He shrugs. Doesn't matter, he says. It could have been. Back in the city, you pass a small shop that sells wax tablets and styluses. A boy's scratching something onto a fresh one, tongue poking out the side of his mouth in deep concentration. You peek over his shoulder. It's a note to his cousin in Ostia. He's going to try and send it with his uncle, who has connections at the station. Even kids are trying to hack the system. Because when the roads are this good, and the horses are this fast, everyone wants to feel a little closer. You look up, and a courier is galloping past again, cloak whipping, scroll tied at his belt. You wonder what it says. A warning, a new law, a lover's regret. The message disappears into the dust, but the road remains. Always waiting for the next one. You're walking now. Not down a bustling city street, but along a lonely dirt path that winds between the rolling hills of southern Gaul. The sounds of Rome, of markets and temples and shouting hawkers, have faded, replaced by birdsong, the occasional clatter of hooves, and wind whispering through pines. You're with a Roman legion on the move, and everything around you smells like sweat, leather, and damp earth. But here's the wild part. In the time it's taken you to yawn, stretch, and nearly twist your ankle on a route, these soldiers have already begun building a small city. Okay, not a real city, but close. What you're witnessing is one of Rome's most brilliant and deeply underrated pieces of tech, the temporary marching camp. Because the legions, they didn't just camp, they engineered their camps every night, no matter where they were. Hills, valleys, forests, swamps, didn't matter. When the sun dipped, they stopped, and within hours turned open ground into a fortified, gridded, defensible base, complete with ditches, walls, tents, roads, gates, and guard towers. Then they tore it all down and did it again the next day. You sit on a fallen log and watch as it unfolds like choreography. The engineers, architecti, move first, measuring out the perimeter using long ropes and a groma. a simple but devastatingly effective cross-shaped surveying tool. 4 men walk in precise directions, planting stakes, shouting coordinates. Others dig ditches, piling the soil into aga, ramparts, that will later be topped with a wooden palisade. You blink, and suddenly a road is appearing where there was only grass. It's like someone hit fast forward on a strategy game. The roads inside the camp are laid out in a grid, dead straight, intersecting at perfect right angles. The Via Praetoria leads from the main gate directly to the commander's tent, the Praetorium, which sits at the heart of the camp like a brain inside a skull. Radiating out from it are the Via Principalis, the cross street and other smaller lanes where centurion tents, supply wagons, workshops and stables are placed. Every tent has a number. Every man has a spot. If you've seen one Roman camp, you've seen them all, by design. You get talking to one of the soldiers while he's driving a stake into the ground with his boot. He's grinning through grime and he tells you the truth with a laugh. We could build a fort in our sleep. And they almost do. After years in the legions, the layout becomes muscle memory. Even in rain, snow or unfamiliar territory, these guys can carve out a defensible fortress faster than most people can pitch a pup tent. You walk past the main gate, Porta Praetoria, where 2 men are already setting up a small guard post. Beyond it, others are digging fossa, a ditch 3 feet wide and equally deep, sometimes more. It's not just for show. A Roman camp under siege wasn't a collection of guys huddling in tents. It was a mini fortress, bristling with wooden spikes, walls and defensive geometry. And here's something fascinating. Each camp was basically a copy of Rome itself. The layout mirrored the city, with the commander's tent like the Capitoline Hill, the main roads mimicking the Via Sacra and Via Appia. Even the gods got their due. A small area was designated for altars and rituals. Rome wasn't just expanding across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. It was replicating itself, one night at a time. As the sun begins to dip, you walk through the half-finished camp, dodging carts piled with shields, bags of grain, amphorae, and bundles of pilum, those brutal Roman throwing spears with soft iron tips that bent on impact to prevent the enemy from throwing them back. There's a hum in the air, men talking, hammers striking tent pegs, fires being lit. The whole place smells like pine, smoke, sweat, and pork fat sizzling on camp stoves. You pause near the Fabri, the camp engineers who double as blacksmiths. They're repairing a wagon wheel with a gear-like hub that catches your eye. It's a primitive version of a torsion spring used for shock absorption. And right next to it, a treadwheel crane mounted on a small cart ready to lift logs into place for the palisade. These guys weren't just builders, they were mobile mechanics. Here's your quirky fact of the day. The Romans had portable forges, like a fold-up blacksmith shop portable. They carried collapsible anvils, bellows and hammers in wagons. If a sword broke, a cart snapped, or a hinge rusted mid-march, there was a guy ready to fix it right there, often while humming a tune and spitting into the fire. Their camps weren't just safe, they were self-sufficient. They could exist for weeks, even months, as semi-permanent outposts if needed. Scholars still debate how fast a standard legion could assemble its camp. Some sources claim 3 hours. Others suggest 6, depending on terrain and how grumpy everyone was. But most agree on this. The speed and uniformity of the camps were unmatched by any military force for over 1,000 years. Medieval armies just kind of flopped down wherever they could. The Romans, meanwhile, built a pop-up Rome every evening like it was part of the bedtime routine. You pass by a few off-duty soldiers throwing dice. They nod as you go. One offers you some posca, a vinegary soldier's drink made from watered-down wine. It tastes like regret, but goes down warm. You thank him, wiping your mouth as another cart rolls past, stacked with timber, freshly chopped from the surrounding woods. They're still finishing the perimeter wall. Within an hour, this place will look like it's been here for years, and when they leave tomorrow, they'll burn the excess, pack the tools, erase the footprints and march on, like ghosts, like engineers with swords. As darkness falls and campfires flicker to life, you sit just inside the walls, watching the stars appear one by one. Rome isn't just a city, it's a system, a code, a formula that can be exported, replicated, dropped like a stamp across hostile landscapes. And here, in a muddy field miles from anything, that system is alive. You wake to the sound of silence, that tense, careful kind of quiet that feels more like waiting than resting. The fires have burned low, the camp is still, but there's an edge in the air now, like the whole place is holding its breath. You're not in the centre of the empire anymore. You're on the border, the frontier. A place where Rome doesn't whisper with marble and elegance, but shouts with stone walls and steel nerves. This is where the empire wears its armour. You pull on your borrowed cloak and step out into the early dawn haze. The camp is already stirring. Guards at the gate adjust their shields, eyes scanning the hills beyond. Officers bark orders. A few soldiers inspect the palisade and the trench with a kind of anxious boredom that suggests they'd rather be bored than wrong. This is liminal Rome, half architecture, half message. And that message? We're watching, we're here, and we're not going anywhere. You follow the column out of camp toward a watchtower a few miles up the ridge. The higher you climb, the more clearly you can see what the Romans were doing out here. It wasn't just defence, it was theatre. These towers, spaced at regular intervals, aren't just lookout points. They're psychological warfare, dotted across landscapes from Britain to Syria, each one just close enough to signal to the next. They serve as a constant, unblinking reminder. Rome is always looking, and then you see it. The limes, or frontier wall. Not the massive ego project that is Hadrian's Wall, though you'll get there eventually, but one of its lesser-known cousins, a ditch, an earthwork, and a wooden palisade stretching across the land like a stitched scar. It's not grand, it's intentional, it exists not just to stop in armies, but to shape perception. To say, here is Rome, there is not. At the tower you meet a junior officer who's spent the last 9 months stationed here. He's part soldier, part administrator, part neighbourhood watch. He points to the horizon and tells you about the tribes beyond the line, some hostile, some friendly, some who used to be friendly until the last census tax came due. His job isn't just to fight them, it's to influence them. Trade, diplomacy, occasional displays of force, a ballista test here, a troop parade there. Soft power backed by very real stone and steel. You climb the narrow stairs to the top of the tower and look out. Smoke curls from a distant village. Below, a small patrol makes its way along the road. 4 men and a pack mule, the kind of group that shouldn't seem threatening but somehow still does. You feel a cold breeze across your face, smell pine and old leather, and suddenly the phrase Pax Romana takes on a darker edge. Peace, yes, but peace maintained by presence, by pressure, by projection. It's easy to forget that one of Rome's greatest technologies wasn't a machine at all. It was image. They weaponized it, standardized it, used it like a sword wrapped in velvet. Everywhere they went, they brought not just roads and aqueducts, but monuments, victory arches, columns, statues of emperors in idealized poses. You could be hundreds of miles from the capital and still feel the capital watching you, through eyes of stone and bronze. You descend the tower and ride with the patrol for a while. Along the road you spot a wayside shrine, a simple column topped with a carved eagle, and a plaque that reads something like, "Dedicated to Mars by Decimus Livius, 11th cohort." A little pop-up propaganda piece. Every soldier who passes it is reminded. The gods are watching, the Empire sees you, don't mess up to them. You pass through a village not far from the border. The locals wear Roman tunics now, speak a rough version of Latin, and drink wine instead of barley beer. A veteran-turned-farmer shows you his discharge papers, bronze plates stamped with imperial seals granting him land and Roman citizenship after 20 years of service. He's proud. He points to his son who's learning Latin and wants to join the legions. You realise what you're seeing isn't occupation, it's assimilation, slow and relentless. Rome doesn't just conquer, it absorbs. Here's a quirky twist. Some of these outposts use sound as intimidation. In certain fortresses, Roman engineers installed echo chambers or created narrow stone corridors where the clatter of boots was amplified and distorted. Imagine hearing the march of 100 soldiers and not realising it's only 10. Scared people make fewer problems. It's not confirmed everywhere, but enough hints remain. Ruins with odd acoustics, passages that magnify footsteps, that some scholars believe Rome had its own version of sound design, long before Hollywood figured it out. You return to camp by sundown, your mind buzzing with what you've seen. Rome's frontier is not a wall, it's a performance, a blend of architecture, intimidation, routine, and routine's most loyal sidekick, fear. You look back at the watchtower, its silhouette framed against the blood-orange sky. A line of smoke rises from beyond the hills. No one panics, no one runs. The tower watches, the soldiers prepare, the system activates. Rome doesn't need to win every battle. It just needs you to think it can. Always, at any time. That's what this is. Every ditch, every outpost, every neatly shaved soldier standing at perfect attention, they're all part of the show. As the stars blink to life and the camp settles into its usual hum of low conversation and oil lamp flicker, you realise Rome didn't just build with concrete and stone, it built with intention. And sometimes that was the sharpest tool of all. You've wandered deep into the belly of the empire now. Not into another temple or military outpost, but into a quieter place, a private villa. Elegant, serene. There's the trickle of a courtyard fountain, a whisper of wind through the grapevines overhead, and somewhere in the distance a faint scratching sound. You follow it past shaded colonnades and through an open doorway into a cool interior study where an older man sits bent over a scroll, stylus in hand, scribbling furiously. He's muttering to himself, cursing a miscalculation, then starting again. This, you realise, is not just any old Roman noble. You're staring at one of Rome's greatest minds, an engineer, an architect, and a bit of a perfectionist. You've just walked in on Vitruvius. Okay, fine. It may not be literally him, he lived during the 1st century BCE, but the spirit of the man is thick in this room. His ideas are etched across every blueprint, every sketch, every measurement. His scrolls, compiled into a treatise known as De Architectura, are sitting in front of you now, open to pages lined with diagrams of machines, floor plans, aqueducts, and proportions. Vitruvius was more than a theorist. He was the guy laying down the rules, trying to codify beauty, utility, and strength into a single architectural gospel. He's the reason Roman engineering wasn't just functional, it was intentional. You settle in beside the desk, quietly observing as the scribe reviews a new design for a temple facade. It's based on Vitruvian principles: symmetry, harmony, and mathematical ratios. One column's width determines the height of another element. Every measurement connects to every other. It's all based on the human body: arms, legs, head, and heart. The idea that man is the model for all perfect structures. That famous drawing of the man with 4 arms and 4 legs in a circle, that's Vitruvian man centuries later. But the theory? Born here. You leaf through the scrolls and find plans for machines you've actually seen now. Water wheels, cranes, hoists, treadmills, siphons. Some are annotated with descriptions of the materials to use: wood types, metals, joinery techniques. Vitruvius didn't just want to design the building, he wanted to design the process, how things were built, where they were built, even how the builders should behave. He insisted engineers be educated in music, law, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. Not because they'd need to sing a song or perform surgery mid-construction, but because he believed architecture was a unifying science. You can't build what you don't understand. You wander past the study and into a small adjacent workshop. On one table sits a scaled-down model of a theatre, carved in wax and wood, with acoustical chambers shaped like bowls tucked beneath the stage. You remember this trick. Vitruvius wrote that these bronze or clay vessels were tuned to specific musical pitches and placed beneath seats to amplify sound in amphitheatres. Some scholars still debate whether this actually worked, or if it was more theoretical, but either way, the concept was ambitious. The goal wasn't just to build a theatre that could hold thousands, it was to make every seat feel like the front row. Nearby, a young apprentice is chiselling a block of soft limestone. You ask him what he's working on, and he shows you a model of a screw pump like Archimedes' famous device, but with modifications adapted to Roman construction needs, as part of a water lifting mechanism described in De Architectura. The apprentice grins. The master says it's for moving water uphill, like we're tricking the gods. You move back into the courtyard, and someone hands you a small rotating model. It's a wind-powered device meant to open and close doors automatically, just one of the inventions based on the work of Hero of Alexandria, who followed in Vitruvius' footsteps and pushed engineering into something close to proto-automation. The model squeaks a little as it spins. It's clunky, sure, but there's something thrilling about it. A future peeking out from the gears. Here's your quirky twist for the evening. Vitruvius also included a chapter on building healthy cities. He believed in the importance of air circulation, natural light, proximity to clean water, and even considered wind patterns when laying out streets. He warned against building in swampy areas, smart considering malaria was a thing, and talked about the psychological effects of good design. And if that sounds like modern urban planning, that's because it kind of is. But Vitruvius wasn't just building with stone, he was building a philosophy. His triad, firmitas, utilitas, venustas, strength, utility and beauty, still echoes through every architecture school today. It's not enough for a structure to just stand, it must work, and it must stir something in the soul. Back in the study you see more scrolls stacked in clay jars. Some are faded, others are copies being prepared for libraries in Alexandria and Ephesus. You ask the scribe how many architects follow Vitruvius's rules these days. He shrugs. Some, he says. Most think they do. Few actually do. And there's the tension. For all his brilliance, Vitruvius was often ignored or misunderstood in his own time. It wasn't until the Renaissance, on the 500 years later, that his writings became the gold standard again. That's when guys like Da Vinci and Alberti and Palladio dusted off his scrolls and went, wait a second, this guy knew what he was talking about. You walk outside into the soft evening air. The villa stands solid around you. Its columns symmetrical, its water channel aligned to catch the light, its proportions strangely comforting. It's just a house, but it feels like a song translated into stone. You look up at the stars, perfect points in a perfect dome, and think about what Vitruvius would have said, that a good building honours the heavens, the earth, the human body and the human mind, and if it doesn't do all four, it probably won't last. The smell hits you before you even open your eyes the next morning. Spiced lamb, maybe? Roasting over coals. Dusted with some kind of imported cinnamon or cumin that definitely didn't grow in this region. There's a pinch of saffron in the air too, and a whiff of boiled vinegar, and maybe, yes, a hint of Egyptian incense smouldering on a nearby altar. You're in a market again, elbow to elbow with merchants hawking goods from half a dozen different continents. But what's more interesting than what they're selling is where they got it. You're standing in the middle of the Roman Empire's greatest, most underappreciated innovation. Organised cultural plagiarism. Or, if you prefer the polite term, tech transfer. Rome didn't invent everything, not even close, but it was phenomenal at finding the best ideas from its neighbours, Egypt, Greece, Persia, Carthage, even the Celts, and tweaking them into something bigger, better, and way more scalable. You pass a stall selling Egyptian papyrus, the seller boasting about its superiority to Roman parchment. He's not wrong. The stuff has been around since the days of the pharaohs, but Rome adopted it wholesale, repackaging it as the go-to medium for bureaucrats, scholars and gossip writers. Nearby, a Greek artisan is selling carved astrolabes and mechanical calendars. You crouch beside one, polished bronze, engraved with stars, symbols and a delicate crank that lets you adjust planetary positions. It's stunning. The man winks and tells you it's based on old designs from the great city of Rhodes, possibly even inspired by the Antikythera mechanism, that strange gear-filled device pulled from a shipwreck. Did Rome invent it? Nope, but they loved it, studied it, built their own versions, or tried to. That's the Roman method in a nutshell. Observe, absorb and improve. They took the Greek crane and gave it industrial ambition. They took Persian road stations and built the cursus publicus. They borrowed architectural columns, renamed the orders, and then slapped domes on top like sprinkles on gelato. And when they didn't understand something, they hired people who did. You duck into a shaded stall where an elderly man is demonstrating a hydraulic organ. Yes, you read that right, an organ. Wind-powered, water-regulated, and completely bananas. You ask him if he invented it, and he scoffs. This? No, Alexandrians had this before we did. I just made it louder. He pulls a lever, and the machine wheezes out a surprisingly decent rendition of a battle march. A few kids nearby applaud. One of them sticks a finger into the water wheel. The machine spits, the kid runs, Rome continues. You wander into a quieter street lined with bookshops and scholarly dens. Inside one, a woman is translating a Babylonian star chart into Latin, drawing each constellation by hand. It's old, she says, very old. The mathematics are messy, but the sky hasn't changed. She shows you a dusty scroll that maps lunar eclipses using a formula the Romans didn't invent, but now used to predict agricultural seasons, imperial omens, and theatre schedules. Science, soaked up like wine into a tunic. Some historians today like to argue over whether Rome really had original tech. The purists complain that most of Rome's achievements were recycled, but those voices miss the point. Rome was the world's greatest remix artist. It didn't need to invent gunpowder or the printing press. It needed to take the best ideas from 10 cultures and make them work together, in a single empire under a single system, with a single postal route connecting them all. You find yourself in a bathhouse courtyard again, one you haven't seen before, smaller and plainer than the ones in the capital. But here, a mechanic is showing off a portable hypercourse system. That's right, portable. A kind of metal brazier fitted with airflow ducts and a ceramic hood. He lights it, and within minutes, the tiles around it start to warm. Took the Greeks' idea, he says, and made it mobile for travelling dignitaries, goes great intense. You blink, Roman central heating, whoa, told you boys. Here's something extra weird. You pass a weapons vendor showing off Celtic-style chainmail armour, called Lorica Hamata by the Romans, flexible, durable, adopted after they fought the Gauls and realised, hey, this stuff actually works better than our bronze breastplates. Instead of rejecting foreign tech, they stole it, mass-produced it, and handed it out to every soldier who could lift a gladius. That's Rome in a nutshell, practicality over pride. But even the Romans couldn't absorb everything perfectly. You stumble across a shop selling Chinese silk guarded like a minor temple by 2 burly ex-legionnaires. The merchant tells you proudly that this roll of shimmering blue silk took 6 months to arrive, passed through the hands of 15 traders, and probably cost more than a farm. Rome wanted to understand how it was made, badly. They never figured it out. Silk's production remained a tightly guarded Chinese secret for centuries. Even Rome's tentacles had limits. Still, you can't ignore the scale of it all. The amount of foreign tech Rome borrowed, rebranded, and spread across its empire is staggering. Greek hydraulics, Egyptian construction techniques, Persian engineering math, even Etruscan sewage systems. Rome didn't just steal, it curated. And with that curation came stability, standardization, uniformity. A Greek water clock in a villa in Gaul works the same as one in Syria. A kiln in Africa fires clay that fits perfectly into a wine rack in Rome. Whether you're making bricks or baking bread, there's a Romanized method and probably a Roman manual to help you do it. Here's a fringe fact you'll enjoy. Some archaeologists believe Rome may have adopted early dam technology from the Nabateans, those mysterious desert engineers who built Petra. There's scattered evidence that Roman provinces experimented with advanced water retention systems based on those designs, but the theory's controversial. Some say it's overstated, others say we've barely scratched the surface. As you step back into the market's central square, everything looks more connected than it did before. The fish sauce from Hispania, the medical tools copied from Greek surgeons, the arches that trace their form back to Mesopotamian temples. Rome is a blender, and everything you're seeing is the smoothie. It didn't matter where the idea came from. If it worked, Rome made it Roman. And the result? An empire stitched together not just by swords, but by science. It's not the sound of marching or chiselling or water flowing that catches your attention this time. It's a hiss, a soft exhale, like breath escaping from the earth itself. You follow it through a side alley in Alexandria, a city under Roman control but always pulsing with its own energy, half Greek, half Egyptian, all ambition, and the sound leads you to a small columned courtyard where something is moving. You creep closer. A bronze door is slowly creaking open. No one touches it, no rope pulls it. It swings as if by magic. But of course it's not magic. It's engineering. And at the centre of it is a man whose beard looks like it's been in an argument with gravity and lost, whose robes are stained with oil and soot, and whose eyes have the wild, focused glint of someone who sees the future and just can't believe everyone else doesn't. This is Hero of Alexandria. You've just stumbled into one of the strangest, most brilliant labs in the Roman world. Hero, sometimes called Heron, depending on who's translating, lived in the 1st century CE and wrote treatises on everything from pneumatics to automata. He didn't build monuments. He built machines, mechanical curiosities, stage effects, early robotics, and now you're standing among them. In the dim workshop, strange devices line the walls. Pipes, tubes, gears, water vessels, wheels that seem to turn with no visible force. It feels like you've stumbled into the ancient version of a steampunk escape room. You crouch beside the self-opening temple door mechanism. Hero notices and waves you over. He explains how it works, not with gods or sorcery, but with heat. A fire lit at the temple altar warms a hidden, sealed vessel beneath the floor. The expanding air pushes water into a second container. That water adds weight to a system of counterbalanced ropes and pulleys, which then swing the doors open. You blink. That's a hydraulic system triggered by heat, all hidden behind a marble altar. For the average worshipper, it's a miracle. For Hero, it's Tuesday. Across the room is another invention. He calls it the Eolipial. You watch as he lights a small flame beneath a copper globe mounted on a pivot. Steam builds inside, and soon the globe begins to spin, powered by steam escaping through two bent pipes on either side. That's right. You are looking at the world's first known steam turbine. It's not connected to anything. Hero didn't industrialize it, but the principle is there. The core idea behind jet propulsion. Right now, it's just a toy, but centuries later, it'll change the world. You try to wrap your head around it. A man in Roman Egypt figured out steam propulsion, created automatic doors, invented a vending machine. Yes, Hero designed one that dispensed holy water when a coin was inserted, and came up with a system to create sound effects in theatre using hidden machines, all in the 1st century. Why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen here now? That question haunts historians. Some say it's because Hero's inventions were seen as entertainment, luxuries for temples and theatres, not practical tools. Others point to the Roman economy. Labour was cheap. Slaves were cheaper. There was no financial need to automate. Still others argue that the technologies to scale these ideas just didn't exist yet. Hero planted the seeds, but no one watered them. You step around a device designed to make a chariot wheel spin continuously as long as water was flowing, an early perpetual motion illusion. Nearby is a theatre model that uses rotating drums and falling weights to perform automated puppet shows. It's all timed, all coordinated, scene changes, sound effects, even doors swinging open in sync with the music. And again, it's not sorcery. It's physics, math, and extraordinary patience. You chat briefly with one of Hero's assistants, a sharp-eyed teenager who's polishing a brass nozzle. He tells you they've recently finished a new version of the coin-operated dispenser, one that now includes a safety latch to prevent overuse. You stare at it, bronze levers, a carefully balanced tray, a weight mechanism, and realise that this is a vending machine with anti-fraud protection. 2,000 years ago. Hero returns with a new drawing, one of his latest concepts. A syringe-like device for controlling water pressure in fountains. He's obsessed with pressure, air pressure, steam pressure, hydraulic force. He believes it can be used to move anything, maybe even cities. You believe him? Outside the workshop, Alexandria bustles with normal life. Scholars debate in porticos. Merchants argue over dye prices. Sailors unload ships from India and Nubia. But here, in this cramped and cluttered courtyard, the future hums beneath the surface. You glance again at the Eolipile spinning gently, the steam now faint but steady. You want to shake someone, anyone, and scream, "Look! This is the beginning of the engine! This is the spark!" But Rome doesn't leap ahead. It walks. Carefully, comfortably. Why disrupt a system that already works? Still, the question lingers. What if they had pushed just a little further? What if Hero's designs had been used to power looms or mills or grain press? What if temples had turned their automatic doors into factory switches? Here's your fringe debate for the night. A few researchers believe Hero did begin developing something close to an automatic mill powered by wind or water. Some fragments suggest mechanisms capable of transforming rotary motion into mechanical work, but the records are spotty. It's unclear if the designs were ever built. Some say they were destroyed, others say they were simply forgotten. You step outside as the sun begins to set, casting a soft orange light over Alexandria's skyline. Behind you, the workshop quiets. The doors are closed, but the machines inside still move, slowly, persistently, whispering a future that almost was. Rome didn't need machines. It had people. It had order. It had roads and armies and an empire to run. But in Hero's workshop there was a different empire being imagined. One powered by wind, steam and cleverness. And though the world wasn't ready, the blueprints were waiting. The smell of fire-kilned earth hits you before the heat does. You're standing on the edge of a workshop in the heart of the empire. This one tucked into the artisan quarters of ancient Sidon, though it could just as easily be in Alexandria or Naples, or even Londinium by now. There's a glow in the air, not just from the furnaces burning like mini-suns inside the dome-roofed structure, but from the objects inside, glassy, molten, shimmering like captured lightning. Welcome to the world of Roman glass-blowing. And no, it's not just cups and trinkets, this tech changed everything. You inch your way inside carefully, the heat swallowing you whole like a sudden desert. It's dense, dry, and full of the sharp bite of ash and melting sand. Around the edges of the room, men and women, yes, women here in the eastern provinces, work with the same quiet intensity as scribes copying sacred texts. One gathers a molten blob from the furnace with a long iron pipe, turns it, blows softly into it, and instantly the glowing lump starts to swell. Slowly. Like it's breathing. And that's the thing, glassblowing wasn't just a technical revolution, it was an aesthetic one. You watch transfixed as a drinking vessel emerges from the end of that pipe, shaped with wooden paddles and shears, then placed into a cooling pit of ash and sand, no mould needed, no carving. Just breath, fire, and finesse. Before this, glass was a luxury. Carved or cast, opaque, cloudy, so expensive only the elite could afford it. But now, this made it mass-producible. You crouch beside a bin of cooled vessels, some are simple, jugs, cups, bowls. Others are stunning, spiral designs, inlaid colours, patterns that seem to dance when you tilt them. The glass is clear, or nearly so, and that's thanks to manganese dioxide. The Romans figured out how to decolorise glass, removing the greenish tint from impurities in the sand. Some scholars debate whether this was fully understood or just a lucky accident of the ingredient availability. Either way, it worked. Roman glassmakers were now producing material that was beautiful, light, and here's the kicker, transparent. You probably don't think about transparency much, but in the Roman world it was huge. Before clear glass, you couldn't see what was inside your vessel. Now, suddenly, liquids were visible. You could inspect wine, show off exotic oils, measure medicines more accurately. In one quiet innovation, the Romans had handed physicians, cooks, perfumers, and pharmacists a better tool for almost everything they did. You ask one of the artisans how long it takes to learn this. He shrugs, then gestures to a boy about 12 years old who's gathering scraps for a melting. You start young, he says. You burn your fingers, then you burn them again. Eventually you stop burning. Seems fair. Outside the workshop, vendors are already hawking the finished goods. Glass bottles for perfume, small vials for medicine, and slender tubes used by Roman women to apply kohl eyeliner with absurd precision. There are long-necked vessels used in wine decanting, glass flasks for collecting tears during funerals. Yes, that was a thing, though whether they actually caught tears or just symbolised mourning is still debated. And then there's the Lycurgus cup. Okay, you don't see it here, but the legend of it drifts through artisan circles like gossip at a bathhouse. A glass goblet that changes colour depending on the light. Green when lit from the front, red when lit from behind. You've never seen it, but everyone talks about it. Some say it's sorcery, others whisper about special metallic dust fused into the glass. Gold and silver nanoparticles. Modern scientists will say one day. Nanotechnology 1,000 years early. You run your fingers across a shard from a broken vase. It's delicate but rigid, clear as a mountain stream. You're told this one came from Syria, another from Gaul. Glass wasn't just made, it was shipped. Across the empire, workshops rose near coastliners, where the best sand could be found. Glass became a Roman export, just like wine, or grain, or iron. Affordable glass spread to every villa, every street stall, every bathhouse. But the wild part? Romans didn't just use it for containers, they used it for windows. You glance up at a nearby domus, where tiny panes of translucent glass sit in a wooden frame above the door. Not perfectly clear, but enough to let in light while keeping the weather out. Suddenly homes are brighter, warmer, cleaner, and in bathhouses steam fogs against the glass like a whisper on the wall. Not all buildings could afford it, sure, but where it appeared, it changed daily life. You wander into a smaller room beside the main furnace, where someone's experimenting with coloured glass rods, twisting them together into beads, fusing them into tiles. This is where the luxury work happens. Millefiori. 1,000 flowers technique that creates delicate, intricate patterns embedded in glass like candy trapped in amber. These aren't mass-market items, they're the status symbols, necklaces, decorative inlays, gifts for the elite, or the gods. Here's a fringe thought for the day. Some researchers have floated the idea that Roman glassblowing influenced later optical experiments, magnifiers, crude lenses, maybe even the groundwork for telescopes. There's no solid proof, but fragments of curved glass have been found in ruins, and some later Roman texts hint at the concept of enlarging images through shaped glass. Was this the birth of optics, or just an accidental novelty? Regardless, what is confirmed is this: the techniques of Roman glassblowing would survive the empire. Even as marble crumbled and roads fell silent, glassmakers kept blowing, fusing, colouring and experimenting. In Syria, in Egypt, in what would become Byzantium, they passed it on, preserving one of the empire's most delicate legacies, one breath at a time. You step back into the sun. Your tunic smells faintly of smoke and sand, and in your hand you're holding a tiny amphora no longer than your palm, given to you by a young apprentice who thought you looked lost. You turn it, watching the way light bends through it, warped, a little imperfect but beautiful. It's just glass, fragile, breakable, cheap even, but in the hands of Rome, it became immortal. The first thing you hear as you step into the theatre is your own footsteps, echoing back at you sharper than they should be, like the stone beneath your sandals is answering. You pause, turn your head, and say a word aloud just to test it. The sound bounces back, clean and weirdly focused. You do it again. The echo doesn't just repeat, it's amplified, shaped, a perfectly tuned ghost. Welcome to another corner of Roman genius that slips past most textbooks. Their masterful manipulation of space, sound, and even earthquakes. Yeah, tonight we're talking about Rome's architectural trolls, those quiet tricks baked into buildings that made everything feel a little more magical, or a little less likely to collapse. You're standing at the centre of a Roman theatre in Ephesus, one of the largest in the empire. It seats 24,000 people, that's not a typo, and you're standing in the orchestra, the semicircular area at the Seura base of the seating tiers, where actors, orators, and sometimes political flamethrowers held court. The seats rise around you in smooth, sweeping arcs. The geometry is precise, the materials dense. You can't see the engineering from here, but you can feel it. A boy climbs to the top tier, about 120 feet away, and claps his hands. The sound reaches you without distortion, as if he's standing a few feet off. He shouts something in Greek, and you catch every syllable. There's no amplification, no hidden microphones, just stone, math, and centuries of experimentation. The Romans, following the Greeks, designed their theatres with acoustics as a top priority, concave seating, hard reflective surfaces, and specific curvatures to keep sound waves rolling like trained dogs. Some historians argue they did this intuitively. Others say they used acoustic devices, maybe even sound models. The truth is somewhere in the marble. You walk to the stage building, the Scaenae Frons, a massive multi-tiered wall with columns, niches and statues. Besides being a visual feast, it is also functional. It bounces sound forward. The niches work like resonators. You notice faint markings near one column, possibly for aligning wooden panels or cloth that altered the acoustics for different performances. Imagine an ancient stagehand adjusting Roman sound levels with ropes and cloth instead of a laptop. But sound wasn't the only invisible trick up Rome's tunic. You take a detour to a lesser-known site near Pergamon, a smaller theatre, cracked and overgrown, but oddly intact despite multiple earthquakes over the centuries. You meet a stonemason who shows you something strange. Some of the stone blocks here were cut with floating joints, tiny gaps filled with lead or softer mortar. These weren't lazy fits. They were intentional. When an earthquake struck, the blocks could shift slightly without shattering. It's ancient seismic engineering. Some temples even sat on sand-filled trenches that helped absorb shockwaves like a primitive form of base isolation. You ask if this was common. The mason shrugs. Depends where you were, he says. In Italy they built stiff. In the east they learned to dance. He grins and taps the stone with a mallet. The tone is rich, almost musical. Head later into the forum of a coastal town long swallowed by sand. You step into another structure that seems more modest. A small temple with curious acoustics. You say a word and it seems to echo more than once, as if it's choosing which walls to bounce from. A local priest tells you this room was used for divination rituals. He smiles slyly and adds, "When the gods want to speak, the walls help them." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Or maybe the architect had fun. Here's your fringe fact for tonight. There's a theory that some Roman architects deliberately designed rooms with whispering gallery effects. Circular or elliptical spaces where a person could whisper in one corner and be heard clearly on the opposite side. A few bathhouses, particularly in the eastern provinces, show signs of this. Unusual niches, curved ceilings, and unusual dome construction. Was it intentional? Was it playful? Was it political eavesdropping? We may never know. You take a moment to rest under the arch of a collapsed aqueduct nearby. Yes, even the ruins here seem engineered for drama. The arc of stone above your head looks precarious, but the keystone is solid. The distribution of pressure still works, even after the rest of the structure is half gone. You realise something. The Romans didn't just build for strength. They built for forgiveness. Their architecture didn't have to be perfect, it had to be resilient. Fail in parts, survive as a whole. That idea pops up again in the Pantheon. Yes, back to that concrete god dome, where the bricks get thinner toward the top and the aggregate in the concrete gets lighter. They were controlling failure, designing it in. Even the oculus in the centre isn't just for light, it's a pressure release valve. Engineers today still debate just how much of this was intuitive versus intentional. The answer doesn't really matter. The result is genius. Back in Ephesus, you climb to the top row of the theatre and look down at the empty stage. The sun is setting behind the city. The stones around you hold warmth from the day, and the whole place seems to hum with stored energy. You say your name aloud. It echoes back. Once, twice, then fades. You realise you're sitting in a speaker, a stone amplifier, a carved promise that the human voice, no matter how small, would be heard. Rome didn't just build big, it built clever, sometimes sneakily so. Not every marvel was a road or a dome or a statue with washboard abs. Sometimes the tech was in the air, bouncing quietly from stone to stone, shaped by minds who knew that greatness doesn't always have to shout. Sometimes it just needs to echo. You've seen some strange things in this empire. Mechanical doors that open themselves, steam engines that do nothing useful, and cities that basically bathe themselves. But nothing prepares you for the moment you step into a dimly lit room and come face to face with a goblet that changes colour depending on how you look at it. Not a trick of the light, not a pigment shift. You blink, move slightly to one side, and there it goes, flashing from opaque green to a deep, almost bloody red. Your first thought? Some kind of sorcery. Your second? There's no way this is ancient. But it is. You're looking at the Lycurgus cup, a masterpiece of Roman glasswork and a straight-up mystery that's baffled scientists for years. The cup isn't in Rome. It was likely made in Alexandria, or possibly in workshops influenced by Eastern techniques, and you're seeing it on display during a state visit to one of the empire's eastern provincial palaces. Everyone's acting like it's just a decorative object, a fancy drinking vessel or religious token, but you can see from the way it's been positioned, from the way guards hover nearby, that it's more. Even they don't know how more. They just know it is. The goblet is decorated with a scene from mythology. King Lycurgus entangled in vines, being punished by the gods. The vines are raised, intricate, almost floating above the surface of the glass. It's beautiful, yes, but it's the colour shift that stops you cold. Under normal light it looks like jade. Under light from behind it glows crimson. It seems alive, reactive. Not glass at all, but some alien material that's listening to your thoughts. Later, back in the workshop of a glass artisan who once held a shard of a similar piece, you learn the real shocker. This isn't just clever colouring. It's nanotechnology. No, really. Modern analysis will someday reveal that the Lycurgus cup contains tiny particles of gold and silver, measured in nanometers, suspended in the glass. They're so small they actually affect the way light behaves around them. The Romans, of course, didn't know they were building nanoscale materials. They weren't consulting electron microscopes. They were experimenting, pushing, and by pure genius or pure accident or both, they created something that interacts with light on a level we still don't fully understand. You hold a more mundane shard of Roman dichroic glass in your hand, found in a less glamorous workshop. It doesn't glow quite like the Lycurgus cup, but it changes tone when tilted. The glassmaker tells you they added powdered metals to create special effects, often for novelty or ritual. The gods like surprises, he mutters. Then he laughs. So do merchants, easier to sell. Practical magic. You begin to wonder how widespread this kind of glass was. Was the Lycurgus cup a one-off, a lucky fluke? Or was it just the only survivor of a broader technique lost to time? Some scholars argue that other objects with similar properties must have existed. Decorative panels, jewellery, mosaics. Others suggest that the level of precision needed makes it unlikely this was mass-produced. The debate goes on, but this cup, this shimmering contradiction, is the only one of its kind we've found, so far. And the implications stretch wider than just luxury drinkware. You're reminded of the Roman obsession with spectacle. Every invention, every material, every little innovation, it wasn't enough that it worked. It had to perform. Roman glass wasn't just glass. It was a canvas, a weapon, a theatre prop. You remember the coloured glass tesserae and mosaics, some with gold leaf backing to enhance their shimmer under torchlight. You remember glass windows that glowed like lanterns in early Christian shrines. And now, this. You pass through a small garden behind the villa, where mosaic fountains trickle quietly. Some of the tiles have a strange sheen, and you wonder suddenly if they too contain microscopic flecks of metal. Were Roman engineers trying to control more than just stone and water? Were they shaping light? Think about it. This was an empire obsessed with control of land, of time, of people, of perception. Manipulating light? That would just be one more tool in the box. Your host, a senator with more money than sense, shows off a set of glass medallions. He claims they glow in the moonlight. You laugh, assume it's exaggerated, until he places one beside a torch and it shifts from amber to a strange coppery red. Not as dramatic as the Lycurgus cup, but enough to make your skin crawl a little. Imported from the east, he says casually, or maybe made in Ravenna. The merchant lied, I'm sure. He grins like a man who enjoys being lied to, as long as it comes with a good story. Here's your quirky debate for tonight. Some fringe historians believe that the Romans were this close to developing optical tools, primitive lenses, even magnifiers. A few ancient texts refer to burning spheres or seeing stones that could enlarge your focus. Nothing concrete has surfaced that proves a Roman telescope existed, but small glass beads have been found that could have had optical properties. Were they for decoration? Maybe. But what if a curious mind held one to their eye and saw the world just a little closer? You walk back through the torchlit streets, your mind still spinning with the image of the Lycurgus cup glowing like something alive. You think about the artisans who made it, who ground gold down to microscopic dust and suspended it in glass just right. Did they know what they were doing? Did they understand the science? Maybe not in your terms, but they understood effect, they understood reaction, and they understood awe. That's what this was. Not a party trick. Not an accident. A moment built to haunt you. The morning finds you somewhere far from palaces, aqueducts, and glittering goblets, deep underground, knee-deep in damp, clinging air that smells like wet rock and iron. You're inside a Roman mine, and unlike the glittering marvels up in the marble forums, nothing here is elegant. It's sweat and groaning wood, torches flickering against jagged walls, and the constant echo of metal biting into stone. But down here in the dark veins of the earth, you're staring at another side of Roman innovation. Not the showy stuff, the muscle, the guts, the raw extraction that fed their machines and bank accounts. You duck to avoid a support beam, one of many propping up the narrow shaft, and follow a team of miners into the next chamber. Their tunics are soaked, their hands blistered, their eyes squinting in the torchlight, but they move with practiced rhythm. A man swings a pick into the wall again and again, his strikes measured not by brute force but precision. They're cutting a vein of galena, lead ore, often shot through with silver. You ask one of the overseers where it's bound. Rome, he grunts, and then the mint. Because mining in the Roman world wasn't just industrial, it was financial. Silver, gold, copper, iron. These metals kept the empire alive. Coinage, weaponry, infrastructure, plumbing. If you want to understand how Rome functioned, you have to understand what it dug from the earth. You pass a team dragging a loaded sledge through a low tunnel. The floor is slick with mud and ore dust. It's brutal, endless work, but it's also carefully coordinated. The deeper you go, the more complex the operation becomes. Vertical shafts with pulleys and rope lifts, platforms that lower to men and raise baskets of ore, simple treadwheel cranes worked by barefoot men walking like human hamsters, creaking with every turn. These aren't improvisations, they're a part of a system. An entire mechanical choreography playing out beneath the surface, all to harvest the raw materials of empire. You arrive at a junction where water drips constantly from the walls. It's rising slowly, pooling ankle deep across the stone floor. You're told this is one of the great challenges, flooding. Roman engineers, being Roman engineers, came prepared. You spot a device along the wall, a reverse Archimedean screw, essentially a hand-cranked pump designed to lift water up and out of the shaft. Elsewhere, teams of men operate large bucket chains, looped systems of wooden scoops on the pulleys that bring water to the surface. You ask if it works. The engineer, covered in grime, gives you a flat stare. If it didn't, he says, we'd be dead. Back above ground, you get a broader view of the operation. The mine entrance is surrounded by huts, smelters and sorting stations. A group of men separate ore from slag, using techniques passed down from Carthaginian metallurgists and Greek alchemists. A small boy sorts tailings by hand, occasionally licking his fingers to test for silver content. You grimace. The overseer shrugs. It's the fastest way. You walk through the smelting zone where ore is roasted in ceramic furnaces, the air thick with sulphur and charcoal smoke. A smelter stirs molten lead with a long iron rod. You see silver beading to the surface, then skimmed off and poured into ingots, neat rectangular bars marked with stamps of origin and weight. These bars will be shipped across the empire, some to mints in Lugdunum, others to military treasuries, others still to corrupt governors looking to keep their slush funds portable. Here's something strange. The Romans tracked their mining operations with obsessive care. You find inscriptions on tablets: who owned the mine, how much ore was extracted, where it went. Even the lead ingots were often stamped with production dates, mine locations, and official stamps. Some of these survive into modern times, dredged from shipwrecks or buried in lost warehouses. It's a kind of inventory system written in molten metal, industrial transparency 2,000 years early. But this wasn't just about silver. You head toward another site, a copper mine in Cyprus, the heart of bronze production. Here, men use fire setting to crack rock. They build a fire against the stone face, heat it until it glows, then douse it with cold water. The thermal shock splits the rock. It's dangerous, loud, and oddly effective. Roman engineers also deployed early versions of blasting, packing small cavities with combustible materials. Nothing explosive, but enough to fracture stubborn stone. Now here's your fringe fact for the night. Some scholars think the Romans were experimenting with primitive forms of chemical mining, using acids or plant extracts to leach metals from ore. It's not widely proven, and evidence is sparse, but in isolated texts and temple records, there are hints of metal drawn without fire. Was it alchemy, proto-chemistry, or just poetic metaphor for unusually wet mining? No one's sure. You pass a small group of prisoners chained together, hammering at a seam of rock under heavy guard. Not everyone in these mines is here voluntarily. Rome ran many of its deeper, more dangerous operations with slave labour. War captives, criminals, debtors. This was punishment mining. Conditions were brutal and life expectancy was short. The empire ran on ingenuity, yes, but also on exhaustion. And yet despite the suffering, the tech kept advancing. You see men using iron chisels hardened with carbon, a proto-steel. You spot a pulley system connected to a grain-powered mill, redirecting its motion to lift ore. Rome didn't industrialise in the modern sense, but it got close. In places like Noricum, Iberia and Dacia, entire regional economies were built around mining tech and logistics. Ore roads, custom stations, forts to protect smelters. It wasn't just extraction, it was an infrastructure ecosystem. As the sun sinks below the hills, you watch a final cart roll away, wooden wheels groaning under the weight of lead bars. You trace its path in your mind, to the port, then onto a ship, then to Rome, then into pipes, rooftops, statues and coinage. Every glittering bit of Roman splendour starts here in this smoke-choked valley of mud and grit. You wipe your hands on your tunic, the grit clinging stubbornly. This isn't the Rome of poets or philosophers. This is the Rome of forges, flame and grit-filled lungs. The silent, grinding engine behind every marble column and golden coin. No glamour, no glory, just sweat, leverage, and really smart people with shovels. You're back in the city now, climbing a slight hill toward the edge of a Roman colonia, one of those cookie-cutter settlements planted across the empire like neatly arranged military trophies. But as you rise above the tiled rooftops and look down over the landscape, something clicks. You're not just seeing a city, you're seeing a grid. Streets laid out like a chessboard, buildings arranged with almost obsessive symmetry, and suddenly, it's clear, Rome didn't just build cities, they designed them, deliberately, strategically, and sometimes with a level of urban planning that makes your modern town feel like someone spilled buildings onto a map and hoped for the best. You make your way down the Cardo Maximus, the main north-south street, and it's exactly as it should be, straight wide and aligned with painful accuracy. Every few paces you pass another intersecting street, decumani, laid east to west, forming a perfect grid system. This wasn't aesthetic, it was logistics. The layout allowed for military control and efficient movement, even airflow. If an enemy breached the gate, the street plan gave defenders predictable lines of sight and choke points. That's right. Your quiet provincial town is also a giant tactical map. You stop at a crossroads and look around. Everything's measured. The Forum is dead centre, like the city's heartbeat, flanked by a basilica, temples, and administrative buildings. Markets line the edges. Housing districts spiral outward by class. Rich on the inside, poor on the fringe. Nothing is random. And then it hits you. This isn't just a city. It's Rome in miniature, a copy, a template. Drop it anywhere, in Gaul, Britannia, Syria, and you've recreated the capital's soul without needing the real thing. You peek into an alley where a small boy drags a bucket of water across a stone channel cut into the street. The gutters run along every road here, sloped just right to allow rain, and whatever else the day throws up to drain away from houses and toward communal sewers, stormwater management in the 1st century. It works better than some modern suburbs you've driven through. You enter a residential block, an insula, where lower floors are packed with shops and workshops, and the upper floors are rental housing. The walls are plastered with everything from crude graffiti to formal political ads. A woman sells fig cakes near a stairwell that probably hasn't been swept in a week. Inside, the rooms are cramped, and light is minimal, but again, deliberate. These buildings fit into zoning rules that regulated height and spacing. Too tall? Collapse risk. Too close? Fire hazard. Rome wasn't just building high, it was trying to build safely. You step out and wander toward the city gate. Traffic bottlenecks a bit here. Carts rolling in from the countryside. Inspectors at the toll house weighing goods and checking permits. There's a mix of smells, horse sweat, baked bread, sun-warmed leather, something definitely rotting nearby. And yet it all functions. The roads in and out are paved, elevated and fitted with milestone markers. Emergency lanes? Kind of. Roman engineers built pedestrian sidewalks flanked by curbs. Actual curbs. The whole city is a walking tour of civic forethought. At the edge of the Forum, a magistrate's clerk is updating a carved stone notice board, the Alba, where official announcements are posted. Court dates, trade regulations, military notices. You ask how long they stay up. Until someone carves over it, the clerk says. You realise this is Roman permanence. In a world without printers or Wi-Fi, the street is the message board. You wander into the warehouse quarter and see another kind of genius. Signage. Not just decorative frescoes or hanging signs, but painted symbols. Grapes for wine cellars, amphorae for oil, loaves of bread for bakers. Universal branding, instantly legible even to the illiterate. One stall has a fish carved into the lintel and a bucket of eels wiggling in a tank below. Another has a flaming torch painted above the door, smithy. The urban design includes visual literacy. Efficient, human. Here's a fun oddity. Some cities even had traffic laws. You pass a wall with an inscription restricting cart traffic during daylight hours, likely to prevent gridlock in narrow streets. Pliny the Elder once complained about the noise of iron-rimmed wheels keeping him awake at night. You realise, Rome had rush hour, noise complaints, municipal codes, probably passive-aggressive neighbours too. Outside the city walls, new settlements are sprouting up. You recognise the same layout forming, Accardo here, Decumanus there, the faint outline of a future forum staked out with chalk and twine. It's eerie, like watching a civilization photocopy itself in real time. Rome didn't just conquer cities, it imposed itself on them, its architecture, its street plans, its identity. And yet, the formula had flexibility. You visit a port town, and the grid bends slightly to hug the shoreline. In a mountain village, the plan compresses to fit the terrain. The pattern remains, but it adapts like a mouldable blueprint. The Romans didn't believe in one-size-fits-all. They believed in one-size-fits-enough. Here's your scholarly debate for the evening. Some argue this urban uniformity was about order and control, that gridded cities made rebellions harder, surveillance easier, taxation more efficient. Others believe it was philosophical, that the grid reflected a cosmic order. an earthly echo of divine harmony? Probably both. Rome liked its power practical and symbolic. You circle back to the Forum as dusk falls. The shadows stretch long across the paving stones. Someone lights a torch near the temple steps. Voices rise from the taverns, and a fruit vendor closes shop, sweeping peach pits into the gutter. Everything hums, everything works. You realise this isn't just good planning, it's systems thinking. Every wall, every road, every sewer, every sign. It all talks to each other. It all fits. And even 2,000 years later, the bones of these cities still show through the modern streets that grew over them. Walk through Barcelona, London, Trier, or Amman, and beneath it all, Rome is still there. Still gridded, still breathing. You take one last look down the Cardo Maximus, now lit by scattered torches and the red spill of sunset, straight as a ruler. A road through time. You wake up to something that honestly sounds like thunder. But there's no rain, no clouds, and no flashes in the sky. Instead, it's the synchronized pounding of hammers, not weapons, but tools, echoing from an industrial district on the outskirts of Rome. You rub your eyes, stretch out the kinks from a night spent on a borrowed triclinium, and follow the noise. It pulls you through the back alleys of a working-class neighbourhood, past bakeries, dye shops, and a man who's arguing loudly with a goat for blocking his cart. You dodge a splash of water from an upper window and turn a corner, and there it is, the clanging heart of the city, a full Launica. At first glance, this might look like a glorified laundry operation. There are vats, piles of cloth, and slaves or workers, depending on how generous the employer is, stomping barefoot inside troughs of pale liquid. But then the smell hits you, and it's definitely not your average soap and water situation. It's ammonia. Sharp, salty, weirdly familiar. And yes, it's exactly what you think. This whole operation runs on urine. Welcome to the glamorous world of Roman textile processing. You sidle up to a foreman who explains, quite cheerfully, that human urine is collected from nearby public latrines, those open-air stone benches with holes in them you keep awkwardly passing, and brought here to be used as a detergent. It breaks down grease, whitens fabric, removes stains. It's effective. It's cheap. And yes, the Romans taxed it. That's not a joke. Emperor Vespasian famously imposed a urine tax, and when his son mocked the idea, he supposedly held up a coin and said, "Pecunia non olet." Money doesn't stink. You peer into one of the troughs where a worker is churning cloth with his feet. It's hard, repetitive labour, but the setup is efficient. Once soaked and treaded, the fabric is rinsed in running water, which is channeled through ceramic pipes from a nearby aqueduct branch. Clean water comes in, wastewater flows out. The system is closed, controlled, industrial. Further back, the cloth is hung on racks, then brushed with fuller's earth, a clay-like substance that helps soften and whiten. You spot a woman mixing dyes in small bronze pots. Indigo, saffron, Tyrian purple for the rich, made from tens of thousands of crushed sea snails and expensive enough to be hoarded like treasure. A single toga dyed in it could cost more than a house. The air here smells like sweat, minerals, vinegar, and pungent ammonia, but it also smells like money. Because textiles in Rome aren't just clothing, they're currency. Social class, status, military rank, even moral virtue, all wrapped up in fibre and thread. You see it everywhere. Senators in broad purple stripes, soldiers in standardised tunics, married women in stole, freedmen showing off their prosperity with elaborate embroidery. It's fashion, yes, but it's also propaganda. You wander over to a loom where a weaver is creating patterned cloth. The shuttle zips back and forth and the design slowly emerges, a border of laurel leaves and stylised waves. The weaver pauses to show you a trick. A weighted warp beam that keeps the tension steady. The innovation isn't new, borrowed from the Greeks, but the execution is refined. Rome didn't invent weaving, but it industrialised it. In large workshops, looms are arranged in rows, workers spinning, dyeing, cutting and sewing in a carefully choreographed dance. Down the street you find another type of operation. Leather tanning. If you thought the laundry smelled bad, welcome to this olfactory nightmare. Hides are soaked in lime to loosen hair, then pounded with dog dung, yes, more animal waste, and finally treated with tannins extracted from oak bark. The result? Durable, waterproof leather used for everything from sandals to military gear. And again, the whole process is regulated. Certain workshops can't be too close to temples or housing districts. Smell is one thing, ritual pollution is another. And here's your quirky fact for the day. Rome actually had anti-counterfeit laws for textile stamps. Certain high-quality cloths, especially those produced for the army or elite markets, were marked with official symbols. Faking these was a criminal offence. Think of it like designer labels for tunics. In some regions, producers even used branding irons on cloth bolts to prove authenticity. You pass a small stall where finished garments are being sold. The vendor shows you a pennula, a kind of heavy wool cloak perfect for travel, and a delicately pleated tunic that shifts colour depending on the light. You ask him if the colour-changing fabric is a gimmick. He shrugs. It sells! You recognise a little of the Lycurgus cup logic there. Flash sells. Roman tech was always about results, but presentation was a close second. Across the way, a stone tablet lists rules for workshop operation. No dye dumping into the street drains, no working after sundown without lantern covers, and, this one scratched in with angry intensity, no urinating near the dye vats. You get the feeling that rule came the hard way. Here's a fun debate floating around scholarly circles. Some believe Rome had a proto-guild system in place for fullers and dyers, especially in major cities like Ostia and Lugdunum. Evidence includes shared workshop symbols, training hierarchies, and even burial clubs. But others argue it was less formal, more a neighbourhood network than a true professional organisation. Still, the lines between artisan, merchant and manufacturer were blurring. You loop back to the laundry vats just as a fresh load of cloth is being wrung out and hung to dry. The foreman shouts something about a delayed delivery. A worker trips over a bucket and curses loudly in vulgar Latin. A child runs through the steam with a basket of tools. It's chaotic, loud, smelly, and completely absurdly efficient. You realise this is Roman technology, not just in the aqueducts and marble domes, but in how they managed labour, scaled production, and used whatever was available, even if that included bodily waste. They didn't need magic, they needed throughput, speed, volume, process. As you step away, the thunder of hammers fades. The stink clings to your tunic, but you don't mind. You've seen the engine room now, you've seen the Empire's dirty hands. Rome made beauty, but first it made laundry water with a kick strong enough to strip paint. You're walking now not through the bustling markets or shadowy workshops of Rome, but along the edge of something less glamorous and way more essential, a road. A simple one, at first glance, just stone underfoot bordered by the occasional milestone or weathered poplar. But the longer you walk, the more it starts to feel like a machine, because it kind of is. Roman roads weren't just pathways, they were infrastructure with a pulse. The Empire's vascular system, pumping soldiers, mail and trade goods from one extremity to another, with frightening efficiency. This particular stretch isn't famous. It's not the Via Appia, the queen of roads, with her regal, time-worn cobbles and tourists asking for directions. No, this is a quieter artery, one of the thousands of lesser-known vie that fan across the empire like capillaries, but it's no less precise. You stop and run your fingers across the surface. The road is slightly convex, cambered, to let water run off the sides. Beneath your feet are layers: gravel, sand, tightly packed stones. The top layer is basalt, smoothed by centuries of hooves, wheels and sandals. And even now, it's level enough to push a cart full of amphorae without snapping an axle. A merchant wagon creaks past you, oxen slow but steady. You catch a glimpse of olive oil jars sealed and packed tight with straw. One of the jars is marked Baetica. That's Spain. You're in Gaul. That oil has crossed mountains, valleys, maybe even parts of the sea, all by road. You step aside and realise this is how the empire worked. Not with magic, with pavement. You fall in behind a mounted courier riding hard, wearing the distinctive cloak of the cursus publicus, Rome's state-run postal service. The system is brilliantly simple. Relay stations called mutations, all set up every 8 to 12 miles, stocked with fresh horses and food. Lodging stations, mansiones, sprawled farther apart for overnight stays. The courier dismounts at the next post, hands off a sealed packet, grabs a new horse and gallops on. It's a chain reaction. Messages from Rome can reach the edges of the empire in weeks. That's right, weeks, in an age without electricity. You stop at a milestone. It's a squat cylinder of stone about shoulder height, marked with the name of the emperor who commissioned the road and the number of miles to the nearest major city. These markers are more than just directions. They're political graffiti. Every ruler wanted their name associated with movement, with progress. One particularly proud emperor even ordered a full resurvey of all roads in the empire just to update the milestones with his name. Petty? Maybe. Effective branding? Definitely. Nearby, a group of surveyors is working on a new road extension. They were using Groma, a cross-shaped surveying tool with hanging plumb lines to keep their angles true. One of them explains how they mark the road's axis first, then build up the layers with absurd care. It's not just about getting from point A to B, it's about not having to fix the thing every rainy season. Roman roads were overbuilt, in a good way. You pass a Roman bridge spanning a modest river. The archwork is pure elegance. No mortar, just expertly fitted stones locked together by the force of gravity. The keystone at the top holds everything in tension. The bridge looks light, but it's hiding a deep engineering truth. Compression is your friend. The Romans didn't fight physics, they collaborated with it. Now here's a juicy detail. Some Roman roads were modular. In certain places, especially along the Rhine frontier, engineers experimented with pre-cut stone slabs that could be disassembled and reused. Need to move the road? Just pull it up and relocate. They were treating roads like a kind of architectural Lego set. Most historians agree it was rare, but the very fact they tried is wild. As you continue walking, you notice another feature. Way stations. Not just for couriers. For everyone. A traveller's inn sits a mile or two ahead, smoke rising from the roof. Inside you find a rough table, warm lentil stew, and an old man sharpening knives while muttering about tolls. You ask him if the roads are safe. He snorts. Safer than they were, but don't ride after dark. Fair enough. The walls of the inn are plastered with graffiti and travel etchings. Names, distances, the occasional complaint. Someone's carved Britannia smells like fish next to a crude image of a horse. The front desk, if you can call it that, has a wax tablet log of guests. The staff are trained to check travel permits and monitor courier flow. This is more than a pit stop, it's a node, a checkpoint, a tiny control centre. Here's your fringe scholarly debate. Did Roman roads actually cause over-centralisation? Some argue that by making it so easy to move everything toward the capital, the provinces lost economic independence. Others argue the roads created a shared identity. One world under stone. Either way, there's no denying their impact. Trade routes exploded, soldiers moved with terrifying speed, cultures blended, diseases spread, and eventually invasions followed those same routes in reverse. You leave the inn and walk past a troop of legionaries on the march, leather sandals thumping in eerie unison. Each soldier carries their gear, their bedroll, their rations. No horses, no carts. Rome trained its armies to be mobile infrastructure. The roads made it possible. A force could be deployed and supplied across hundreds of miles with minimal delay. The message was clear: Rome doesn't just show up. Rome arrives prepared. As twilight sets in, you see travellers settling in for the night along the roadside, campfires flickering, merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, all moving along the same arteries. You find a dry patch under a tree and sit down. The basalt is still warm from the day's sun. You realise something as you lean back. Roads weren't just tech, they were philosophy. A way of saying you are connected. You are not alone. You are part of something vast, deliberate, and occasionally smug about how good it is at concrete. And the craziest part? Some of these roads are still in use. You've arrived at the docks just in time to see a ship being hauled into the harbour's slipway by a team of oxen and a set of thick hemp ropes. The vessel groans like a tired old soldier, barnacles crusted along its hull, cargo long since unloaded, but it still holds its shape, sleek, balanced, and engineered like a creature designed to eat waves for breakfast. Welcome to the world of Roman maritime technology. It's not all warships and triremes, though they had those too. What you're looking at now is a corbeta, a broad-bellied merchant ship, and it's one of the reasons the empire could stretch from Britain to Syria and still function like one giant, overconfident grocery store. You walk along the dock, avoiding piles of rope, oil slick barrels, and stray dogs asleep in nets. This harbour is one of many in the empire, structured, busy, and deceptively advanced. You pass a row of warehouses, horea, with arched ceilings and elevated floors to keep goods dry and well ventilated. The airflow is engineered. The roof tiles are grooved to collect rainwater. There are drains underfoot leading into ceramic piping. This isn't just storage, it's logistics. Rome had ports that would make some modern shipping yards blush. You peek into a warehouse as a group of workers unpacks amphorae full of fish sauce, garum, that salty fermented Roman nectar that somehow made it into every recipe. The amphorae are all the same size, standardised, stamped with origin and volume. You realise the genius. Every container fits perfectly into racks, ships, carts and storage slots. Roman shipping wasn't freestyle, it was systematised, predictable, scalable. They weren't just trading goods, they were trading order. Back at the shipyard, you watch carpenters repairing hull planks. The ship's ribs are visible, oak and fir pegged and sealed with pitch and fibre. You ask a shipwright about the design, and he grunts, holding up a curved tool used to measure angles. Copy of a Greek model, he says, but we made her fatter, more stable in storms. She carries grain from Egypt. He pats the hull like it's a beloved old mule. She's been back and forth 10 times, might even make it 11. You climb aboard a nearby vessel preparing for departure. The deck smells of tar, sea salt, and goat dung, courtesy of a couple of live animals being shipped as part of someone's wedding dowry. A crewman shows you the bilge, where water collects, and the pump system used to keep it dry. It's not fancy, just a long-levered rod connected to a tube, but it works, efficient, quiet. You peek below deck and see the genius of it all. The cargo is stacked with mathematical precision, amphorae wedged in with rope netting to prevent sway, counterbalanced to keep the keel straight. Now for something that'll mess with your sense of time. Roman ships used underwater concrete. That's right. Harbours like the ones at Caesarea and Portus were built using a special blend of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater that hardened underwater. You pass a labourer stirring a thick mix near a submerged quay, and he tells you proudly, "This dock won't move for 1,000 years." He's wrong, it'll last 2,000. The secret? Pozzolana, a volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples that reacts with salt water to form an incredibly durable binder. Rome didn't just pour concrete into moulds, they sank wooden forms into the sea, filled them with this slurry, and built piers and breakwaters that still exist today. The science behind this wasn't rediscovered until the 20th century. Rome just figured it out. You head toward a section of the harbour with raised platforms and bronze instruments. This is where the naval engineers work, the ship nerds. You watch as one draws a model of a paddle wheel ship powered by treadmills. No one's built it yet, but it's in the scrolls, and they've started assembling a prototype. You ask if it'll work. He shrugs. It'll move, not fast, not graceful, but it'll move. Here's your fringe historical rabbit hole. Some records suggest the Romans were flirting with early steam-powered maritime designs. Based on Hero of Alexandria's work, a few scholars believe experimental paddle boats were powered by compressed air or basic steam pressure. Others think this is fantasy. Either way, the blueprints existed. Whether they reached the water, that's still up for grabs. You stroll along the dry dock and find a carved wooden rudder, larger than you expected and mounted off to the side. The Romans had long since ditched the old dual-oar steering system in favour of the sternpost rudder, which gave better control and manoeuvrability. They didn't just want ships to float, they wanted them to dance. Some were even fitted with bilge keels to reduce roll. That's next-level stuff. Offshore, a smaller vessel is being rowed by a team of lean, sunburned men. It's a navis actuaria, light, fast, built for passengers and express freight. You wave to the helmsman, and he waves back, then calls out, "Keep walking, stranger, the sea doesn't wait." You head back toward the main dock, where an officer is organising a shipment of military supplies, shields, helmets, ballista parts, and rations sealed in wax. Each crate is marked with wax tablets listing contents, weight, and intended destination. This is the Roman Navy's quiet genius, not in combat, but in support. They moved legions by sea, built floating bridges, ferried elephants when they had to, and they did it all while keeping records. Night falls, and the harbour glows with the soft orange light of oil lamps. The sea laps gently at the stone piers, and the last of the day's ships is moored with thick, salt-crusted rope. You sit on a bollard and watch the moon rise over the breakwater. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another Roman port is watching the same moon. Maybe a corbetter is sailing toward it now, its hold full of oil, wine, wool, or rumours. Rome didn't conquer the sea, it collaborated with it, harnessed it, quietly embedded tech in every plank, every pier, every grain of pozzolana, until the Mediterranean wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. And the empire, it just kept sailing. You wake up early for this one, Not by choice, but because some overzealous dockworker dropped a crate of amphorae right outside your window at sunrise. The crash echoes like thunder, and suddenly the whole port town is stirring. The smell of sea salt mixing with the sharp tang of olive oil and the unmistakable scent of civilization doing what it does best, expanding. You grab a heel of bread from a sleepy vendor and head out for one last journey, not on a road, not on a ship, but straight into the veins of Rome's bureaucratic body. Because if Rome had a secret superpower, it wasn't the aqueducts or the concrete or even the shiny swords. It was administration. Cold, calculating, relentless. You're standing now in front of a tabularium, Rome's version of a records hall. At first glance, it looks like any other official building. Columns, inscriptions, bored guards with itchy spears, but step inside and suddenly you're in the middle of an ancient data center. Scrolls upon scrolls, wax tablets, ledgers, pigeonhole cubbies full of census records and tax returns. Scribes scurry around in dusty robes, muttering about grain quotas and water permits. It's glorious, it's terrifying. It's how the empire kept itself from choking on its own size. A clerk shows you a papyrus roll listing grain allotments for a region in North Africa. Every name, weight, delivery date logged. There's another tablet tracking troop movements, and beside it a weather log for the past season. You blink. Why do you need the weather, you ask? The clerk snorts. To explain the tax evasion. Touché. You follow the scent of ink and beeswax deeper into the archive, past a man painstakingly copying a contract about an olive grove dispute. The system is redundant. Copies of everything are sent to multiple cities. Edicts are carved into stone or bronze for public display. Ensuring the word of the Senate or Emperor isn't just heard, it's remembered. Forget cloud backups. Rome had rock. Outside the building, you watch a town official post a new set of civic regulations on a wooden board. Written by a team of scribes, reviewed by magistrates, and checked by an imperial censor before getting anywhere near public eyes. You ask how long it takes to approve something. The answer? Depends on how many people you need to bribe. Fair enough, Rome wasn't pretending to be fair. It was pretending to be functional. And honestly, it mostly worked. You make your way to the aerarium, the public treasury, where stacks of sealed chests are guarded like the last food at a gladiator training camp. Inside are coins, standardized, marked, minted, in exact weights. You hold a denarius up to the light, seeing the emperor's face staring back, a form of propaganda that fits in your pocket. Rome understood money not just as currency, but as communication. Now here's where it gets really meta. You visit a censor's office. These were the officials responsible for more than just taking headcounts. They monitored public morality, updated the Senate rolls, and oversaw major infrastructure budgets. In modern terms, they were part IRS, part FBI, part Urban Planning Board. You spot a board showing current census categories. Landowners, propertyless citizens, freedmen, slaves. Everyone's slotted in, everyone's tracked. There are fines for lying, more fines for failing to show up, and way too many forms. But oh, the systems, the sheer clarity of it all. Even the army ran on paperwork. You stop by a beneficiarius outpost, a kind of military administrator's booth where a soldier stamps a requisition for grain delivery. He's got a wax tablet, a stylus, and a look of someone who's spent more time filing paperwork than fighting battles. Logistics over bloodshed. That's Rome's real battlefield. And just when you think it can't get more obsessive, you find a chamber dedicated to the water supply. Engineers known as curatores aquarum oversee the flow of every aqueduct in the region. You're shown a diagram, yes, a literal blueprint, of pipe junctions, flow rates and maintenance schedules. The clerk says proudly, "This is for Aqua Marcia, still runs cold after 60 years. You ask if anyone ever steals the water. He smiles. We tax them too. Now, here's your final fringe debate. Some scholars believe Rome got too good at administration, that the weight of its bureaucracy eventually became a burden, an empire of forms and fines, choking under its own rules. Others argue the opposite, that Rome's ability to administrate allowed it to survive centuries longer than it had any right to, that it was this precise machinery of permits, censuses, ledgers and logistics that kept the gears turning long after the edges had begun to crack. You leave the tabularium and walk through the forum one last time. Everything you've seen, the buildings, the baths, the armies, the roads, the sewers, the ships, it all circles back to this. The system, the engine, the paperwork no one ever romanticizes. but without which none of the rest survives. And just like that, the empire starts to fade in your mind, not in grandeur, but in gears. You see Rome not as a marble colossus, but as a living organism built from spreadsheets and stamps, fed by grain dockets and water permits, held together not by gods or gladiators, but by grease-smudged scribes with incredible handwriting. You glance back once more at the ledger being closed for the day, ink drying on papyrus that might outlast the man who wrote it, and you finally understand, in the Roman Empire, tech wasn't just about machines, it was about management. So here you are, back where you started, maybe still in your bed, blanket tangled around your feet, fan humming like a lazy legionnaire on night watch. Or maybe, just maybe, you're still wandering some dusty Roman alley in your mind, ducking beneath laundry lines, stepping over mosaics that whisper stories, and wondering how many of their marvels were built out of boredom, genius, or sheer bureaucratic stubbornness. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived this empire. Too many baths, not enough Wi-Fi. But even as a tourist in time, you've seen enough to realise that Rome wasn't just chariots, togas, and shouty senators. It was a machine. A surprisingly clever, absurdly persistent machine. Not sleek, not gentle, but effective. It had its beautiful parts, the fountains and domes and stained glass marvels, but it also had plumbing that gurgled, mines that wheezed, and tax collectors with stronger arms than hearts. You saw it all, the humble screw pump churning out water from dusty fields, the glass blowers who accidentally invented nanotech while trying to impress temple patrons. The engineers who thought, yeah, let's pour concrete into the ocean, that'll work. And they were right. You watch the army march, the paperwork pile up, and the bathhouses run hotter than your apartment in August. And through it all, you've seen the same quiet brilliance. The drive to organise, to optimise, to tinker. Rome didn't need alien or fusion reactors. It had lime, lead, and a lot of unpaid interns. It had persistence and systems, lots and lots of systems. So next time you turn on a faucet, grumble about traffic, or get annoyed at a building's lack of airflow, remember this, the Romans were probably already working on it. 2,000 years ago, barefoot, half naked, and wondering whether that new type of mortar was going to explode again. Sleep well, citizen. You've earned your toga.